Hello and welcome to Too Many Movies, the podcast where we discuss DVDs, Blu-rays, and even the occasional VHS tape. I'm your host, Hal, and with me here today, Ben. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ben. I just came into existence like 20 seconds ago.
Wow.
This is my first day on Earth.
First day on
Earth. Somehow before that, I was able to watch 2 movies. All right, in all seriousness, I'm Goop Videos. I make YouTube poops, or at least I used to. I'm not officially retired, but like I haven't made one in a while, so kind of I'm either semi-retired or hiatus, but I don't know. It's I'm mostly doing just video editing for other creators nowadays. Hal and I both work for Schaffrillas Productions. That's like my main gig, but I've also done work. Yep. I've done work for Nathaniel Bandy and Emperor Lemon. And also a couple of other people. I've done work for the band Wang Chung and also the band Triumph. So I got a decent portfolio, I guess.
You got a decent portfolio, you know, little of this, little of that. Very cool.
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's goopvideos.com, but I'll talk more about that later. We're going to do the accolades at the end.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, one thing you didn't edit was Mad Max 2, correct?
Didn't edit?
You didn't edit.
What do you mean edit?
Sorry, I was that was us transitioning into talking about the movie. So you didn't edit the movie.
I was not involved in the editing process of Mad Max 2 because I wasn't even conceived yet. I don't even think I was a molecule yet.
No, neither was I.
No, there was no way, like, whatever sperm cell I came from hadn't even been conceived inside my father's ball sack yet.
It's true. So, yeah. But yeah, Mad Max 2. We wanted to talk about some Mad Max movies today. Mad Max is kind of back in the cultural zeitgeist recently because of Furiosa, but we didn't want to necessarily make this a Mad Max franchise review episode where we go over every movie because some of them are just not worth talking about, to be honest. So we chose the 2 ones that really, you know, we could really talk about because there's something to talk about with each movie, I would say.
Yeah, and I have not seen Mad Max 1 or Thunderdome.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I have seen Furiosa, though.
Yeah.
Furiosa was really good.
Mm-hmm.
We'll talk about that in a bit.
Yeah. So, but yeah, let's start off with Mad Max 2, because you really wanted to talk about Mad Max 2. Which, yeah, so I watched it earlier in the month when I started my Mad Max just marathon, just be like, might as well check it out. James is doing the Georgia Miller ranking. Might as well. It's got, these movies are going to be in conversation for a couple of months. I might as well watch them finally, because Mad Max I had never really gotten into growing up. Because the very first Mad Max movie I'd ever seen was Fury Road, which we'll get into later. But because I remember people being like, "Oh, you don't have to watch any of the Mad Max movies to understand Fury Road," which again, I'll get to that when I'll get to that. But so this is my first time watching truly the Mad Max movies. And yeah, I would say out of the first 3, this one is definitely the best. It's just, I don't know, it feels like the most well thought out and definitely the best aspects of what these movies are famous for, I would say. What did you think of Mad Max 2, Ben?
I really liked it, actually. So again, as you said, like, same with me, my first exposure to the Mad Max franchise was Fury Road. So I was very eager to go into this and be like, okay, so now I get to kind of see like the early development of this franchise. And everyone was pretty much telling me this was like the other necessary one to watch. Like, everyone was like, 1 and 3 are like okay, but like it's like Fury Road and the Road Warrior, or Mad Max 2. It's called the Road Warrior here in America, but yeah. Everyone was saying Mad Max 2 was like the other big one. And yeah, I mean, I was excited to watch it, and overall I thought it was pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Especially for like an early 80s action film.
Oh yeah.
I think there's some aspects of the filmmaking that was definitely dated by today's standards, and especially when you compare it to Fury Road. But it's what it really lacks any of that campy 80s cheese. Like it's got a couple of things that make it feel 80s, but like it's one of those movies that I think does a really good job at standing the test of time and not really feeling dated. Like even some of my favorite movies like Back to the Future, you know, that which overall I think is a better movie,
Hmm.
but like even so, comparing the two of them, Back to the Future is definitely much more dated by today's standards because it's a product of its time,
Yeah.
whereas uh, the Road Warriors feels much more like, you know, a personal project rather than just like something where it's like we have to sell this to as many people as possible. George, you could definitely tell George Miller was like, I want to go out and make the best action movie I can.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. You're right though. I do feel that way with some 80s movies is sometimes they become so cheesy that you're just like, dude. But sometimes that's really endearing, but sometimes it's really not. But yeah, I agree. I think this one is one of those 80s movies that definitely has that cheese to it, but in an endearing way and in a way that you can watch years later and still appreciate what it's going for. Um, yeah, it's basically what a good sequel should do while also being just a genuinely good movie. Because again, you haven't seen the first Mad Max. I have, and I could tell you that it works as both a movie and a sequel. Um, in the weird sense though, because this is something I found out, I had to learn the hard way through watching all these Mad Max movies, is that there is no coherent plot amongst all three of them. It's a very episodic kind of franchise where every movie is different from the last and has really nothing to do with the last one.
I think that's definitely apparent from just the fact that Fury Road, like I said, we'll get more into detail about this, but to sum it up, Fury Road is essentially like a soft reboot. Like
Yes.
it maintains some of the plot devices from the original trilogy, but pretty much like is its own timeline.
Yeah. Even
Um,
even then, I think you could make the argument that Road Warrior is also kind of a soft reboot in a sense because the first movie is pretty much just summed up in the first 5 minutes of Road Warrior, but even still, you could cut out the first 5 minutes and you still get a great movie with a great story, and you don't need anything else. Is the thing like you don't need anything explained.
right. And the other thing is too is like, they recapped the first movie, but like you said, they didn't have to. And I think a really great thing, I know I'm going back to Fury Road again. I know we're going to go very in depth with that later on, but to compare and contrast with Fury Road, they don't do a recap. Instead, throughout the movie, Max has like these visions of like his family. I guess it's from the first movie. Like I know the basic plot of the first movie, even though I haven't seen it.
Hmm.
And like he gets those visions of his family, and it's like, you know, is that the exact same family from the first movie? Probably not. It's a different one from whatever timeline Fury Road exists on, but it's a lot more effective than having to just completely recap the events from the first three movies because it was 25 years after the fact.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
the first Mad Max is very much separated from what we know of Mad Max today because there's still quote unquote civilization in that movie, like society, because people are still like going to bars and stuff. They're going to in the fact that there's indoors in a Mad Max movie, considering what we know of Mad Max now, is just weird to me because when I think Mad Max, I think this sprawling desert of just nothing but post-apocalyptic cars and stuff like that. That's not in the first movie. Vaguely is, but not really. And so then you get to the second movie. It's not entirely removed. You kind of get it because again, at the beginning they're like, "Oh, society has fallen" and whatnot. So then you start seeing the people in the post-apocalypse dressed in their post-apocalyptic garb. You're just like, "Okay, I get it." It was kind of said in the beginning. Um, but yeah, no, it's just such a far and away version of what we know of Mad Max now. It's very strange.
So the other big thing is, like I said, even though I haven't seen the first movie, I know I pretty much got the entire gist of it from the recap in the beginning.
Yeah.
So from that timeline of the original trilogy, so even though they don't necessarily connect a ton, there is still a connection.
Yeah.
So we can basically infer, like from watching the recap, that it's like, okay, so during the first movie, it wasn't necessarily a complete apocalypse. It was more like a dystopian future that was on the verge of complete collapse.
Yeah.
So when that took place, Max was basically living through, you know, the time right before the apocalypse.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at the aftermath of the first movie where, he's lost everything and there's like no civilization, everything has basically turned into a barren wasteland, and like Australia has basically turned into a giant outback. Like it's not, the outback isn't just one part of it. Like
Yeah.
Australia has basically just become the outback.
Yeah, exactly. Like resources are slim and you're trying to survive. Every man for himself.
Yeah, but it's not completely barren like it
No.
is in Fury Road.
Yeah.
Where like with Fury Road, you can definitely tell, like if that was connected to the original trilogy, you can definitely tell, okay, now we're looking at like the really distant future. This is where there's complete societal collapse and everything is being either rebuilt or everything has died.
Everything is
all
sand.
Yeah, everything is just sand. It's like Hayden Christensen's worst nightmare. But yeah, but even so, like that's something I really admire about the progression of the decay in the Mad Max franchise, is that even though like you can kind of consider each one a soft reboot of its own, they each kind of show a progression of how bad things will get like as time progresses.
Yeah, exactly. It's very interesting. I'll give it credit there. It's weird for sure when like you first watch these movies, you're kind of weirded out. You're just like, what is happening? But I think through hindsight, I think it is interesting the way that this franchise kind of progresses on itself.
Yeah. So I don't, if you had more to say, you could say now, but I actually wanted to kind of start talking about the movie itself, like kind of delve into the plot, talk about the characters, the direction, like, all that stuff.
Yeah, just one is fine, kind of a first movie syndrome where it's like, okay, I see what they're doing, but I can see it getting better. And then the only thing I have to say about 3 is that it sucks. Like there's nothing more to say about Beyond Thunderdome. It just sucks.
Yeah, I noticed Beyond Thunderdome is like certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, and basically that's my way of, I saw that, and basically that's Rotten Tomatoes' way of telling me I'm gonna hate this movie.
Yeah,
like
it's not. I mean, I can understand why people are probably nostalgic for it. Like it's one of those sequels that isn't really that great, but people are nostalgic for. But like, man, I could not get into it. I was like, this, and it sucks because I love when movies get silly and goofy and funny, because I love ridiculous movies, because then it makes them far more entertaining. But this took it too far. I was like, this is just stupid and boring.
Yeah, from the friends who I know who have actually seen Thunderdome, a lot of them are like, it should have been a lot campier because that would have made it more enjoyable. But instead, just the pacing was really messy. There was a lot of character derailment for Max, and just like, again, I can't say for sure because I haven't seen it, but basically what it sounds like to me, because the concept of like Thunderdome sounds really awesome. But like, I could just kind of tell like it was a good idea, just was not executed well.
Yeah, the titular Thunderdome is great. It's just like what 1/20th of the movie, so it's like
yeah, I think I'll get around to watching it eventually, just out of curiosity. But for now I think my headcanon is just going to be like the episode of Rick and Morty where they pay tribute to Mad Max. And I hate to bring this up, but like, not because I don't like talking about Rick and Morty. It's just painful to talk about it because
Yeah.
I have to be reminded that like only the first 3 seasons are worth watching.
Oh yeah, that was a season 3 episode. I completely forgot
Yeah.
about that.
Season three was like the last season where I felt like Rick and Morty actually had something to give me.
I mean, season 3 was the last season I paid attention to. I think I forgot to watch season 4, and then it just kept going, and I was like,
Season 4 only had one like really good episode,
Yeah.
and that was the vat of acid episode. I actually, here's my thing. I still uphold that the first 3 seasons of Rick and Morty are really good.
mhm.
For anyone who actually gives a shit, just so we don't derail this entire conversation, I'll leave it at this: watch the first 3 seasons of Rick and Morty, and then watch the vat of acid episode in season 4, and then basically skip the rest. Unless there's like, maybe there's a couple good episodes scattered, but I haven't watched the show since season 4, so I don't know for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But either way, back to Mad Max. But interestingly, I'll mention for the Rick and Morty episode, they do, there is a Thunderdome in that where Morty's basically like, fighting a bunch of people with his new like barbarian arm.
Mhm.
And like, I know that like probably the actual Thunderdome movie is nothing as cool as that, but like I have a feeling like when I eventually watch it, I'm just being like, I'd rather be watching Morty just beat the shit out of people.
Probably.
Yeah, it's a sad day when Rick and Morty did Mad Max 3 better than Mad Max 3.
Yeah. Oh boy.
But back on topic. So let's talk about Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior itself.
Mm-hmm.
So first thing, let's talk about the star of the film. I think we got to get the elephant in the room out of the way. Let's talk about Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson.
Oh boy. Mel Gibson is one of the most polarizing and controversial figures in all of Hollywood. There's no beating around that.
I think that's fair to say. He was definitely one of the first, I would say, because, like, I feel like in modern day, every other week there's a new controversial figure that's outed. But like, I feel like he was definitely one of the first where people were just like, hey, wait a minute. Celebrities are kind of crazy.
Yeah, but Mel Gibson especially.
Yes.
So I don't want to go into a huge tirade about Mel Gibson because,
of course.
Because what's been said about him has already been said to death.
Yes.
But to basically sum it up, him as a person is like, a whole can of worms that you don't want to open. But let's talk about him as an actor and as a director.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't direct this movie. This movie was directed by George Miller. And we'll talk a bit about George Miller as a director throughout this and when we talk about Fury Road. But I want to talk about Mel Gibson first because honestly, as much as I love Tom Hardy's performance in Fury Road, I think Mel Gibson is the best Max.
I think too.
Yeah, at least based on what I've seen in this movie.
I think Tom Hardy has the potential to become the best Max. I just feel like we need another movie with him to truly solidify that.
Yeah, and there's a possibility we may not get that because, unfortunately, Furiosa's not doing well at the box office.
Well, shit.
Yeah. It got outdone by fucking Chris Pratt Garfield, and I'm so mad. It's like... Again, well, I don't want to talk too much about Furiosa because we're not really going to be talking about it. I'll mention a couple of things about it during the Fury Road segment, but
yeah,
it's really good. If whoever watches this podcast, just please go see Furiosa while it's still in theaters. You will not regret it. It is really good. It's very good. And actually, this is going to be, you know what? No, I'll save this for later.
Sure. Because
I don't want to say this now.
Sure.
But anyway, back to Mad Max 2. So Mel Gibson. I think he is a really good actor.
I think so too.
And I can point to this movie as basically like his, demonstrating his acting chops. This and Braveheart. Like I think are the two best like acting roles he's had, in my opinion.
I have not seen Braveheart, but I have heard it's like up there for him. Like that's one of his most famous.
Yeah, he also directed Braveheart,
yeah.
And I can almost like kind of see how I think working with George Miller kind of rubbed off on him as he'd eventually become a director himself.
Hmm.
And Mel Gibson as a director is also very good. And I can like he has his own style uh that's that's not entirely like George Miller, but you can tell from watching movies like Braveheart. I don't remember if he directed The Patriot, but if he did, I don't think he did.
I don't think
But
so.
no, I don't think so either. But from watching movies like Braveheart, Passion of the Christ, and like Apocalypto, like those, all three of those movies, with the well, Braveheart's a little bit more grounded in reality compared to uh, Passion of the Christ and Apocalypto, but
Hmm.
you could kind of tell, like, probably working on this movie and just the Mad Max franchise in general, um, Mel Gibson really like took a lot of admiration and inspiration from George Miller,
Hmm.
like into his own movies.
Yeah.
Um, but so it's kind of cool to see like Mel like early on in his acting career. You know, not only that he's kind of very talented right from the get go, but like that probably becoming this character of Max and working with George, really had a profound impact on him as a filmmaker. And I think that's really cool. But
Yeah.
as far as Max as a character goes, he's awesome. Like
Hmm.
just everything he says, his charisma, he's got great chemistry with almost every character in this movie. And that's saying a lot because he basically gives no shits about anybody in this movie.
Absolutely, yeah. The cool thing about Max as a character is that he's not necessarily like he is the main focus of the movie, but he is definitely kind of separated from the rest of the characters in a way because he is that lone wolf kind of character where he just happens upon this group of people and just has a bit of an adventure with them, and then he's on to the next thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like everything he does in the movie is kind of for his own benefit.
Yes.
Like even though there's hints that like he gains an appreciation for like the helicopter dude and like the feral kid and some of the other people in like this faction that he's, aligned himself with, he's still very much like everything is because like either he doesn't have a choice or he's only doing it for himself. Like for instance, later on in the movie, when he basically says, "You're on your like I got you your fuel, now you're on your own. I'm out of here."
Hmm.
And then, the leather gang basically, crashes his car. He's left with and left for dead. He doesn't have a vehicle anymore.
Right.
So it's like, and then he's brought back to, to the scrap. What's the best? I want to have a word for like the faction he's with. Do they have a specific name? So
No, but just like the tribe, the citadel, just like that gas area, that place where they refine the gas refinery, I guess you could say, because
yeah,
that's what they've taken over.
yeah, like basically proto Gastown.
Sure.
Like I'll just call it that. Let's call it Gastown for now. It's not Gastown from Fury Road, but
Hmm.
it's essentially this movie's Gastown.
Yeah, because it's this gas refinery where these people have taken up shelter in it, and they're using it for their own benefit.
Right. So anyway, so like after Max basically gets his shit like fucked up and he's left for dead, he gets taken back to Gastown and gets treated. But instead of like trying to leave, he's smart enough to know I have no car, so and I got nowhere to go and I'm too injured to do anything, so I might as well help these people because I've got literally nothing else to lose. Like to me, like I feel like Max was kind of expecting to not come out of the final battle alive.
No.
Like like he was so injured during that fight
Hmm.
that I think he was pretty much banking like, okay, so this is how I die, so I might as well go out with a bang.
Yeah. Yeah.
But fortunately, by the end, he does survive, and he helps them. He helps the Gastown people escape from the leather gang.
Yeah. Lord Humongous and his cronies.
Yeah, we'll get to Lord Humongous, who's just an amazing villain. He's nothing compared to a Morton Joe, but he is still really awesome.
Yeah.
But again, another thing about this is like, everything is very like DIY, like the aesthetic of the movie. Everything feels like everything's like recycled. Like all of the gear that the people in Gastown and the Leather Gang wear is like hand me down, like stuff they found like in the trash.
Yeah.
So you could definitely tell that this is right after the break of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So everything is just starting to be recycled. Whereas with Fury Road, as we'll talk about, you can tell that like they're starting to kind of figure out how to farm and mine resources with what little they have. It doesn't feel like a lot of shit is necessarily recycled. Everything is kind of like being made from like scrap.
It's very much a filmmaker's film where you can really see how like the mindset, the thinking process of how they want to shoot something, how they want to show characters, how they want to dress those characters up. Like it's really cool attention to detail that you start to pick up on multiple viewings.
So let's talk about a couple of other characters. The first one, I want to get this out of the way, the dog. The dog is so cool.
Yeah.
Another thing I really loved about that one is that it's an Australian cattle dog, which makes sense because it's from the movie was made in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think that made the most sense. But Australian cattle dogs have been in the spotlight again as of late with Bluey. Like the kids show Bluey.
I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, the kids show Bluey. I'm a huge fan of that show. Which honestly, I'm even shocked I love that show so much. I'm at my desk now and I have a little plush toy of Bluey's sister Bingo. Yeah, no, if you haven't watched Bluey, definitely check it out. But we're not here to talk about that. But the reason I bring it up is because, like, I know about blue heelers like the Australian cattle dogs from Bluey because the main character and her family are all Australian cattle dogs. And when I saw the movie, I was like, oh my God, it's like Bluey. And actually the dog actually kind of looks like Bluey's Uncle Stripe. Like it's like if you look up what the dog from Mad Max 2 looks like, and then you look up Uncle Stripe, they look like almost exactly the same. It's kind of uncanny.
Can I just say that this dog was one of the best acted dogs I've ever seen in a movie? Like, every scene, like, I don't know, just the vibes that dog brought felt like that, like Max had kept this dog on for years, and it was just a really well acted dog, I thought.
Yeah, and the fact that it felt so like that this dog was attached to the hip with Max, and that it felt so believable, like ultimately made the dog's death like later like so much heavier.
Yeah, it wasn't just we're gonna kill the dog for edgy reasons, like haha we've killed the dog. It's just like no, it actually felt believable within the story.
And they actually did it tastefully too. Like they didn't show it on screen. They didn't even show the dog's body.
Yeah,
like, it was done very tastefully.
Yeah, you understand through the filmmaking.
And the other thing is too is something I actually kind of gave the movie shit for when watching it was like Max really didn't mourn the dog, but then again, like I had to kind of remind myself that like it's not that Max didn't care about the dog, but Max is not the kind of guy that really gets attached to anyone or anything.
Yeah,
like the dog, like.
I feel like in his own way he is mourning, but it's just not as obvious. Like I feel like you do still feel that he is sad for the dog, which I don't think he felt sad for any other human character that I've ever seen, which, that's kind of saying a lot.
Yeah, I mean, he barely gave a shit about Helicopter Guy, even though Helicopter Guy actually really liked Max
and saved him.
Yeah, and that's saying a lot too about Helicopter Guy's character. And again, after this we're going to go into him, but the fact that it started off with Helicopter Guy basically does he have a name? Does that guy actually have a name? I'm going to look it up really quick.
According to the letterbox, it says the Gyro Captain, which
the Gyro Yeah,
But
because he drives a gyrocopter.
yeah, but saying helicopter guy is funnier to me. So
Yeah,
helicopter guy.
it's the same thing. Helicopter guy, gyro captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I just didn't know if he had an actual name.
No.
No, he doesn't. He's a nameless character as much as this dog.
Yeah.
But and it's kind of an interesting parallel between the two of them, considering that they're both nameless, and where Max actually gives a shit about the dog, and he gives no shits about helicopter guy.
Yeah.
It's like the two parallels, and
Yeah.
also there's a scene where Max eats some dog food because I guess there's like no other like readily available food around, so he's forced to just eat canned dog food.
Yeah, it's great.
And then he gives the other half to the dog, and then doesn't give any to helicopter guy. Afterwards, helicopter guy is kind of forced to pick up whatever scraps is left in the can after the dog is done, which at that time made sense because like he was Max's prisoner. They weren't really mutual partners yet.
Yeah,
but,
he didn't
like,
trust him.
But it kind of goes to show it's like the two nameless characters in this movie, and like the dog is treated more humanely than the actual human, you know?
Yeah. It's both funny, but it also helps to kind of show visually Max's way of dealing with other characters. Like it's great.
Right. It's like I care more about this dog because he actually helps me, he's loyal, and he doesn't piss me off because he doesn't talk.
Right.
You know? Whereas this helicopter guy never shuts the fuck up and he tried to rob me. Yeah. But yeah, so last thing I want to say about the dog is a very interesting fact I found. So originally in the script, it was George Miller wanted to have a three-legged dog because it would kind of show like, you know, an apocalyptic side to the animals.
Sure, yeah.
But they weren't able to find one. So originally, George was going to put an ad out in the paper basically saying, hey, we're looking for a three-legged dog for a Hollywood production. And his agent immediately stopped and was like, no. If you do that, people are going to start sawing dogs' legs off. Like, for profit.
Yeah.
So I'm glad, like, his agent caught that and was like, oh, you're right. Shit, let's not do that.
Let's not do that.
So then they were like, okay, so let's cut that out and we'll keep a four-legged dog. And so then they had to then find a dog. And the dog that they found, I don't think they ever officially named the dog either. If they did, I think after filming because I know Mel Gibson has an Australian cattle dog, or at least had one.
Mm-hmm.
He might have been given the dog, or either that or it was the stunt coordinator that was given the dog. I don't know for sure, but either way, the dog handler or the stunt coordinator who was in charge of that found this Australian cattle dog that was like on death row. He was like scheduled for euthanasia.
Oof.
And and he basically told the pound, like, can I at least see if this dog is trainable before you kill him? And he's like, sure. And this dog was like so obedient and could do so much stuff that they were like, no, we got to take this dog.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of cool that like this dog was basically not only became like, you know, a Hollywood dog, but was saved from euthanasia, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, when I think of obedience with this dog, like I think of the scene, it's part of one of the best scenes in the movie is when helicopter guy is all tied up in Max's car and he has the dog aiming the gun at him, and the dog has like a bone attached by a wire attached to the trigger of the gun. So if the helicopter guy moves at any point, the dog would just like rip the bone and like pull the trigger on the gun on the guy. It's so elaborate and so funny, but it sticks in your head. I love that shot so much.
The other thing I love about that shot is when they're driving, they go past a rabbit and the dog notices it. And the helicopter guy, like, immediately you're like, oh shit, I'm dead.
Yeah.
You know, he's gonna turn to face that rabbit, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
And he just has this huge sigh of relief, like, oh, thank God this dog is trained.
Yeah.
But the other funny thing was, even if the dog did turn, he would have been fine because we later find out that Max lied. The the shells in his shotgun were blanks.
Right.
And then later he finds another shell and he's like, oh, is that one dead too? And then he just points the gun towards helicopter guys like, you want to find out?
Yeah.
Like I love the dynamic between the two of them. So now we're going to go into helicopter guy. If you want to start, you can.
Yeah. No, I think he's really cool, this guy. Because at first you think he's just like some character that Max comes across and then abandons once he gets to the actual citadel of people at the gas town. But he keeps coming back, this helicopter guy. And so he's not just a one-off comic relief. Like, he's actually integral to the story. Because then he eventually does save Max after Lord Humongous and his cronies attack Max in his car. So he's relevant to the script. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think he's honestly as well written of a character as Max is. He's probably my favorite character. Like, Helicopter Guy's my favorite character, and I also think he's the most well written.
I think so.
Like,
too,
he has a really good arc. And the other thing I really like too is he has a lot of good loyalty. Like, I think that's another good parallel between him and Dog, is like being that they both are nameless in the credits. Like, he's just as obedient and loyal, even though he's a human. Like, he's like, no, I don't want to, even though this guy, like, had a gun to my head and tied me up and made me walk like 5 miles in the desert with this fucking, like, with these diesel, cans. I'm still going to save him because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
You can tell he's not a malicious guy. He's just trying to survive like everyone else in this, wasteland. He's not a bad dude at all. Like, no. Yeah, he tried to rob Max in the beginning, but that's only because, he really has no other choice.
Yeah, yeah.
But one other thing I really loved about Helicopter Guy is he initially, like, kind of takes a liking to this one girl in the Gastown faction. And he's, like, ready to, like, bail with her. Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
And she has a change of heart and is like, I can't abandon my family.
No, yeah.
And he's like, I understand. And she's kind of like, you can go without me. And he's like, and he doesn't say it, but he's basically like, you know what? I'm going to stay too because it's the right thing to do. I'm going to help these people.
Yeah.
I'm going to help these people.
Yeah. Little character moments like that. It's great.
Yeah. He's a much better person than Max in that regard. Because Max will only do things because he has to.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was saying, like, you could make the argument that maybe Max isn't main character material. He's because I remember reading a review for this movie kind of describing Max as more of a mythic figure that just kind of happens upon a different story every time. And he definitely plays that angle very well. Whereas I feel like in any other movie, maybe the helicopter guy would be the main character. But I'm glad they have it where Max is definitely the main focus throughout. But helicopter guy is the one that gets like an arc and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think to an extent Max also has an arc, but again, it's all still for personal reasons.
Yeah, it's a personal arc as opposed to an arc among the other characters.
Right. And it's made ambiguous with the ending monologue where it's like, they never see the Road Warrior again. So I think either Max just kind of moves on and forgets about it, or maybe he actually does take something away from helping these people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
played out like a story being told.
Yeah. And Max himself may not even be aware of like what he learned and what he's taken away from this experience.
Right.
It's like he's become like they say, he's become a shell of a man, but like little by little by doing these like acts of good, he's slowly rebuilding himself. Anyway, is there anything else? I think that's all I had to say about Helicopter Guy. I think I talked more about the dog, but like honestly, fair. I think that's all I had to say about Helicopter Guy. Is there anything else you want to say about him?
No, I guess one of the things I wanted to point out about the girl he likes, when I was watching it with friends, everyone was saying, oh, she looks like JoJo Siwa. And I was like, oh.
Oh, no. Now I can't get that out of my head. Fuck.
Karma is a bitch, man.
Yeah, it sure is. But So that would be interesting if Mel Gibson and JoJo Siwa were in a movie together.
Wow.
I don't know if I'd ever want to see that. That would be a complete shit show.
Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah, no. The two of them would just be on a rant about Jews and transgender people for the whole movie.
Hello.
Yeah, exactly. Let's not do that.
Yeah. Let's talk about something wholesome like Mad Max 2.
Yeah, let's talk about Lord Humongous and why he's the biggest piece of shit ever.
Yeah, first of all, just on the surface, Lord Humongous, great name, great look, because he has like the Jason mask and he's super muscular and he has barely any clothes on. It's great. And then one thing I didn't pick up on the first time I watched this, I picked on the second time, when he's holding back Mohawk guy. And he's just like, I know the pain or something like that. And you see the back of his head and you see like veins popping in the back of his head. It's very like Evil Dead-ish. That was really cool.
Yeah. When did Evil Dead came out in like what, 81?
81. It was filmed in 79 and then officially released in 81. Yeah.
Yeah, this movie was also released in 81. So I doubt George Miller was influenced by that because I think that was also Sam Raimi's first film.
Yeah, no, they were filmed they were probably filmed around the same time, but like opposite ends of the earth, so they probably had no idea about each other. I just thought it was really cool.
It's a cool coincidence.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lord Humongous. One thing I really do like about him is that he's a looter, he rapes people, he kills people, and his design and the rest of his gang, where they all wear like these all this bondage gear and like, you know, leather. You can tell it was a very intentional style pick for these guys because straight up, there's a scene where Max and Helicopter Guy see the gang like pillage, like one of the Gastown,
yeah, those people that were trying to escape Gastown, and they're just raping and pillaging them.
Yeah, and they straight up like it's not in super gruesome detail, but they straight up rape and kill like the girl.
Yeah,
like there's like no beating around the bush. Like they're out there and they're horny.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
Like
it's awful, but it's great.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh yeah, we're just leather daddies because we feel like it. It's like, no, they're leather daddies because they're out to get you.
Yeah, exactly.
Know?
Yeah,
they want your ass.
It's scary, but it's just a great way of showing visually just what these characters are about. You know, you don't have the characters being like, oh, we're this, and this. It's like, no, they're showing it visually, but also, like you said, tastefully. Like, well, as tastefully as a rape scene can be. You know.
It's more tasteful than a Clockwork Orange.
Sure.
That's
a good point. Yeah.
Even so, Clockwork Orange is in like my top 5 favorite movies.
Oh, I love that.
And
movie.
Like, yeah, and even so, not that I don't think there's any way to say that any of those scenes were tastefully done,
right?
But they were done tasteful enough to not come off as like poor taste.
Right. Exactly.
Like Stanley Kubrick did it in a way where it's like, okay, I want to make the viewer uncomfortable, but not to the point where they're going to leave the theater.
Right, exactly. You need that balance because then you're just doing it for tasteless sake, which can be funny in its own right, but not for everybody, for sure. Like,
yeah, let's just say Doug Walker definitely did not do that tastefully. And what was it, To Boldly Flee, where Linkara raped Nostalgia Chick or something?
Yeah, in the original script, it was very much more blatant about that. Oh,
yeah, that's how you don't do a rape scene, well, especially a scene where you don't tell the actors that you're going to do it until the day of.
Quite frankly, this really sours my opinion on To Boldly Flee.
Yeah, well, that To Boldly Flee in general soured my opinion of Doug Walker as a filmmaker and a person.
Yeah.
It seems like recently, from what I've seen, he's kind of gotten his head together, but that's just a whole, again, Doug Walker's a huge can of worms that we could spend a whole video talking about.
To Boldly Flee, it's no Kick-Assia.
No, Kick-Assia is much better, like by Channel Awesome film standards. Like Kick-Assia is not even a great movie in my opinion, but it's much more tasteful and much better than To Boldly Flee.
Yeah.
But anyway, The reason why we were bringing that up, though, is because, yeah, even George Miller, like, he kind of knew the limit of what to show and what not to show.
Yeah, that's why you have the characters looking through binoculars and a telescope, and you can only see bits and pieces of what's happening. And there's this one shot I really liked where it's helicopter guy looking through the binoculars, and he's just like, he has like this face where he's not really smiling, but it's an observing face. He's just trying to observe it, and then like his mouth kind of lowers, and then he's like, oh, I see what's happening. It's great. Like, I'm glad that we get that shot to kind of show what's happening.
Yeah, and once again, it's kind of and Max has absolutely like no expression to this. Like he just either doesn't care or is so used to seeing this stuff that it doesn't faze him.
Yeah.
Whereas helicopter guy is like, oh wow, like I can't believe that.
Yeah.
You know, that was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so another thing I really liked about Lord Humongous is like anytime he or his gang is on screen, they have these really like blaring like horns in the score. And especially during this there's like a montage scene where he's like burning his hostages. And it's like dun 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 dun. And that score, oddly enough, when I first heard it, first of all, I really liked it, but then I was like, wait a minute, I've heard this before.
Really?
And I realized, so there's a reading of the creepypasta NES Godzilla on YouTube. And during the final battle with Red, like the main antagonist of the story, the guy who did the reading used that exact like score. I think it's called like Humongous's Vengeance or something like that.
Okay.
He used that exact like song in his pasta, and I'm like, great, now I can never unhear that. You know, I'm like, I'm always gonna associate that song with NES Godzilla creepypasta.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say it's from like a different movie, but no, it's from a retelling of a creepypasta. That's funny.
Yeah, and actually, it's done very well with that creepypasta.
Yeah.
It fits incredibly well as like a final boss theme.
Yeah.
But almost because of that, it works. It actually kind of worked better than it did in the movie. But even so, the way it's done in the movie was just as effective. Like it really puts into perspective how ruthless and dangerous this guy is.
Yeah.
And like, you know, they're coming to get you. You know, you're fucked.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I really do like Lord Humongous as a villain out of the first three. I think he works a lot better. He's not as active a villain as maybe a Morton Joe is, but I think that is still part of the point because he has so many cronies doing stuff for him that he just doesn't need to do a whole lot. And I still feel like that's very thematically relevant.
Yeah, and I think another thing we'll realize when we're talking more about Fury Road is how much not only of a reboot Fury Road is, but almost somewhat of a remake of Mad Max 2. Like there's a lot of it's not a complete remake, but there's a ton of nods and tributes to Mad Max 2 and Fury Road.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing with Mad Max as a franchise, as we said, is that each movie really doesn't have anything else to do with what came before. It's very much like its own thing. So I think you are going to get a lot of repetition, but not in a sense that they're just redoing it. Probably more so in the sense that they're redoing it, but in a way to kind of like evolve what they did before.
I mean, it was 25 years since they had made the last movie, and it was like, you know, we can't just completely do something new. We have to, like, we can do something new, but we do have to pay tribute to the original to kind of bring these ideas to a new audience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't really know if there's much more I have to say about Lord Humongous, other than I think his death was a bit unceremonious. Like he straight up just crashes into the truck, and that's the end of him.
Yeah. I think that does, because I feel like Max kind of has it more so with the Mohawk guy. Like he feels like more of an active villain, an active threat. That's kind of because he, like I said, like he has more to do with actually fighting Max in that climax, whereas Lord Humongous really doesn't. Which is why I say I think Lord Humongous is not that active of a villain. But yeah, you're right. I think that does kind of write them into a corner, which is just like, okay, how do we get rid of him? He just crashes into the truck.
Right. Yeah, so it was a bit unceremonious, but you're right. At the same time, so the Mohawk guy's name is Wes.
Wes.
And yeah, Wes. So let's talk about him next. So he's basically the right hand man to Lord Humongous.
I'd say so,
Like,
yeah.
maybe not explicitly, but he's the other character of this leather gang who's focused on.
Yes.
And there's a big reason for that, and that's because in the movie, the feral child that Max kind of befriends kills. I don't know if it's his lover or just like his friend or his brother.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can never really tell with these guys, because I wanted to say lover because we live in the 21st century and everything's gay and it's Pride Month.
Yeah.
But also it felt that way because everyone's wearing these like bondage gear and everyone kind of looks like fruity to an extent because they all got colored hair and mohawks and all this other shit. But
yeah,
either way, I think it's meant to be ambiguous. Whoever this person was that the feral child killed with the boomerang, it's like, okay, this person was important to him.
Yeah.
And now he's pissed, and he wants his revenge on Max and this kid. And again, and like we said earlier, like Lord Humongous is like, there'll be another time, another place. Like, save your energy for like the real battle.
Yeah, exactly. Which the real battle is the chase at the end.
Yeah, and Wes actually does like, get a foothold on like the truck that Max is driving. He kills quite a few of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And even like at the end when the kid is like trying to get the shells for Max on the roof of the truck,
mm-hmm.
Or the hood, I should say.
Yeah, the hood.
Like he comes up and there's like straight up a jump scare where like he's like, ah, he's like, trying to get the kid.
Yeah.
I kind of saw that coming. Like, I knew that was going to happen. Like, something's going to pop out or he's going to pop out, because
the way it's filmed,
like the way it's filmed and the way it's edited, like there's no sound for that. All you hear is just the kid's heartbeat.
Yeah.
And that's another scene I really love too. And I don't really, do you have anything more to say about Wes? Because honestly, I want to talk about the feral kid now.
No, please. Let's talk about the feral kid. Because he's one I was kind of scared with when watching this movie. I'm like, oh, a child in a movie. Those can often be very hit or miss for me. But I think through thinking about it, how they show this kid and his ultimate story in the movie, his ultimate point, I really do like his inclusion.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if he has an official name.
I think it's just the feral kid.
Yeah, he's just still the feral kid. So, also interesting fact I know about him. So he's no longer an actor.
Mm-hmm.
So the actor's name was Emil Minty, I think that's how you pronounce it. And he's no longer an actor. He's actually a professional jeweler now.
No kidding.
Yeah, he works at a jeweler in Sydney. So, and he has two kids of his own now. So.
He has two feral kids of his own.
Yeah, he has two feral kids of his own, and he's probably like, someone comes in with some uncut diamonds and is like, "Hey, can I get any money for this?" He's like, "Oh, shiny, shiny, shiny." Yeah, in all seriousness, no, this kid is awesome. And again, the third like nameless, like I think pretty much almost everyone in this movie is nameless except for like, well, there's the Toady, but that's technically a nameless character too.
Yeah,
like even a lot of people refer to him as Toady, but he's like technically the Toady.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I really like this kid because I think one of the reasons I do is that he doesn't get dialogue. He's just the feral kid. And I feel like when you give a child dialogue, it can come across as forced because, again, they're children. Like, they don't really know how to act that well. Obviously, there are exceptions, and sometimes they give really good performances. But I feel like you want to placate to the strength of a child actor, in which case they haven't really articulated that the how to speak dialogue very well. So just making him this feral child that just makes these weird noises, I think works a lot better.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, one thing I was kind of scared with this child, like I said, I was scared with the whole, like, the fact that he's just there because, I mean, it's a child. I don't know. It felt kind of forced that you would insert a child into this movie, um, but I think unlike something like Beyond Thunderdome, which had a whole tribe of children, which especially felt forced, where it's just like, now children can come see this movie. It's like, no. I feel like with the inclusion of the feral child, they knew just to have him be that kind of perspective, um, where and I feel like you need that perspective from the child because then it also it also explains why there's a narrator in the movie because that feral child grows up to be the narrator, you know?
Right, exactly. And that, yeah, and I was going to say too later on, it's revealed later on that the guy who was narrating the whole time was the feral child. And that actually opens a lot of questions, like who taught him to speak?
Mm-hmm.
Did he teach himself to speak? Because it's clear this kid has like no parents. And
Yeah.
the reason why he's feral is because no one else is taking care of him and he's like having to fend for himself. And, you know, and he's just kind of probably learning from all of the other animals that live in this, the gas town.
Yeah, the pigs and whatnot, the chickens. Which, again, though, I think that's one of those things where it's like, well, it's not really important to the story because he's just reminiscing about this time that the Road Warrior came and essentially saved his people. Which I really like that, viewing this story as kind of like a myth where it's just the adventures of Mad Max and this one story that's being told by this guy when he's super super old and he's just retelling stories to probably his own tribe at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of makes it ambiguous as to whether or not what actually was shown in the film was entirely true
That's true too. That's a good point. Yeah, is this really a reliable narrator? Not that he's intentionally lying about stuff. It's that he's an old man. This happened when he was a child, so he's just trying to remember what happened.
Right. I think it's probably did happen in that timeline, like to an extent, but some of it may have been exaggerated based on his perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very, but again, describing it as a myth in that sense, I really, really do appreciate that. That's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. So this one scene where like him and Max have like a really good heart to heart is the scene. So earlier in the film, Max finds this music box in a truck that plays like Happy Birthday, and later on when he meets the kid, he plays the music box for him and the kid is like, wow, that's so cool. And then like there's no dialogue between the two of them. First of all, the kid doesn't speak, Max doesn't speak to him, and the kid just puts on this like really like bright smile, and then Max is just like, here, you could have this, and he's like so happy about it. And again, it kind of goes into this thing about Max where it's like, does he actually care? But it's most likely because he's like, I have no use for this thing, and this kid will get like more enjoyment out of it than I will.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like that, how there's not really any dialogue. It's just them kind of he just throws it to him and you instantly get the excitement that the child feels for this like little gift.
Right, exactly. And I think later on when Max is like ready to basically leave after he's fulfilled his contract, the kid comes by and like plays him the music box to try to convince him to stay.
Yeah, it's great. I love little moments like that.
I know, it's so good. I didn't really have a ton to say about most of the other characters. I kind of liked like that one girl who was like very untrusting of Max in the beginning, but then was like, you know what, I was wrong about you.
That was weird because she definitely felt like she was going to be more of a prominent character, and the most important aspects of her are relegated to just like 2 scenes where it's like, I don't trust him, and then a couple minutes later, okay, now I trust you. It's like, oh, okay. Which I can kind of forgive that because the main focus of the movie is on Max and the helicopter guy and just the people as a whole. You know, it's not just separate characters. It's like it's Max helping all these people, really.
Yeah, exactly. Um, I think honestly, I'm almost ready to start talking about Fury Road because I don't think I have too much else to say.
No,
But
yeah.
I think the last character we should definitely talk about is Papa Gallo. The
That was the leader of the right?
yeah
Yeah.
the leader.
Yeah, I'm so bad with names. But yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, cuz he is the leader of this tribe, and then uh he is the one who ultimately is trying to make Max help them. Um yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing, I don't want to like jump too far ahead, but I just want to say this before I forget. Similar to Lord Humongous, hit so Papagallo and like the warrior girl that like didn't trust Max, they both die in the final battle.
Yes.
And both of their deaths are pretty unceremonious. For the warrior girl, it made sense because she really wasn't developed that much.
Mhm.
But for Papagallo, he was kind of like, yeah, the weight of his death is felt, but like it felt like the pacing of the final battle was very rushed, so it felt glossed over because of that.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a testament to the fact that I almost forgot who this character was when you said Papagallo. I'm like, wait, who? Oh, right, that guy. So
Yeah,
I do
I
feel
totally
like he could have been a little more developed. I agree.
yeah, and I totally did not have to look up his name to remember either. I totally don't have two monitors where I have Discord on my first and then Wikipedia on my second. um, but either way, I think he was developed pretty well,
Mhm.
but like he didn't have to go through any arcs. He
Yeah,
was already like he was already skeptical of Max in the beginning, like, can we trust this guy?
yeah,
What can he do for us? And then after he's like, okay, so this guy did fulfill his contract. Now I want to try to convince this guy that he can do more than just be a scavenger.
yeah. I do like that he's the voice of reason to Max because, well, he is the leader of these people. So he wants what's best for the people, not so much himself. Which is something that does kind of rub off on Max. Whether he takes that to his next adventure, you know, that's up in the air. But that's not what this movie's that contained in this movie. I feel like you can see him kind of learn that lesson.
Yeah. And also, I feel like Papagallo's existence is kind of the last of the old world. Like,
Yes.
you have this guy who clearly is old enough to remember what the world used to be like. He's, still maintaining these life lessons he had from, the pre war era of the universe. And, like, he's trying to say, Max, you can be more than just a scavenger. Whereas when in Fury Road, pretty much everyone in that universe, with maybe the exception of Max and maybe some of the older characters, even though they've completely like gotten immersed in their current reality, um, are a lot. They're all like, this is all we know.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I also the last thing I wanted to say about the movie as a whole is just the final twist about how they're going they're being chased because Max is driving the truck and you assume he has all the gas in there, and then that's when he crashes into Lord Humongous and then the truck flips over. He's fine, by the way, but the truck flips over and then it's revealed that it's nothing but sand and dirt in there because the people who had gone the other way, they had all the gas in those like little containers. And I was like, all right, you know what, you got me, movie, that was great. Like it's a great switcheroo for like the final, just like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. And it's great for to like it's a great surprise for Max and it's a great surprise for the audience.
Right. Another thing is like he was very injured before that battle, and because this is another thing, I don't want to go into a whole film theory thing, but because the feral kid is said to be the narrator, there's a possibility that maybe in this timeline, the reality is maybe Max actually did die, and like the feral child just escaped and survived,
Yeah.
but wanted to kind of allow Max to have this living legacy. Like, you know, that was the last we saw of him, and now he's going on to help the next person. Like,
Yeah.
you know, maybe he wanted to kind of allow Max to have this superhero legacy.
Yeah, adding on to that whole mythic figure of Mad Max.
Right. And it also brings into the idea that like each of the films might be episodic and have their own timeline.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, that's great. There's a lot to appreciate about this movie. Now that I've seen it twice, I feel like I was a little off put by it the first time I watched it, but watching it a second time, I was able to really appreciate what it was going for.
Yeah. I think I had all I had to say about it. Do you want to wrap this up with a Fantano score and go on to the next one?
Yeah, I gave it a 7. But I think I can see it either going up in score or remaining that, but I still appreciate it. I definitely want to add it to my collection is the thing. Like, that's how we usually wrap up our discussions on films is like, would I add this to the collection? Because I don't currently own it, but I would love to have this on Blu-ray.
Yeah, same here. I watched it on HBO Max.
Same.
And yeah, I think I definitely want to have like a Blu-ray of this and Fury Road.
Yeah.
But honestly, I give it an 8. It might be a 9, but I'm going to give it an 8 because I think my main problem with it is just the budget constraints.
Sure.
I mean, it was only made on a $4 million budget. But don't get me wrong, it was still a really great movie. I mean, lots of great movies are made on small budgets.
Of course.
Like, there's a lot of portions in the action where they speed up a lot of shots and it's incredibly noticeable.
Yeah.
And those moments really took me out of the movie where it was like, oh, you know, like
it is awkward.
I understand. Yeah, it felt really awkward, but if it wasn't for that, I would give it a 9, but I got to give it an 8 just because like it's excusable for the time, but it just, I don't know. It really kind of like took me out of the movie.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's my only major gripe with it.
Sure. Yeah. I like I said, it's definitely the best out of the original 3.
Absolutely. And I don't even have to see 1 and 3 to know that.
Yeah.
Like, I can already tell.
Pretty much.
So before we go into Fury Road, I was going to say this earlier, but I wanted to wait until we actually wrap this up. But this is a definitive hot take. I actually kind of liked Furiosa a bit better than The Road Warrior. Yeah, and I think that mostly just has to do with the fact that I enjoy Fury Road so much more that I think I'd have to give Furiosa another watch because I've only seen it once in theaters. So maybe when it comes out again on home media and I watch it again, that opinion might change. But I really did like Furiosa. I thought it was amazing. And again, I can't talk about it much here because of spoilers.
Right.
But all I'll say is I really did think it was a great expansion to the Fury Road timeline. And I think it was just a pretty epic film.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would like The Road Warrior a bit more if it wasn't for the filmmaking constraints. But that's about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, great movie. Definitely would recommend. I would put it in my personal collection and yeah, give it like 4 stars on Letterboxd.
Very cool.
Yeah. So with that, you want to go into Fury Road?
Let's get into Fury Road. I'm glad we chose this as our second movie to talk about because, well, not only do I own it on Blu-ray, but it's one that I've definitely had a lot of mixed opinions on over the years. Not mixed in the sense that I've always hated it, but that I've never been in the same camp as everybody else where like I think it's the greatest thing ever made, you know?
Yeah, I don't think that either. However, after my second viewing and watching Furiosa, it grew on me immensely to the point where I understand the hype for the movie and also I edited a video for Emperor Lemon talking about Fury Road.
I watched that video, yeah.
Yeah, and while working on that video, Aaron pointed out a lot of like amazing stuff about the movie that I didn't really notice on my first viewing.
Mhm.
And it really helped me gain an appreciation for it. So initially when I watched the movie, I gave it like an 8 out of 10, saying like it was really good. I just don't understand why it's like regarded as one of the greatest movies ever made. But
Mhm.
and I still don't know if I would go as far as to say that. However, I'm at that point now where I'm like, I give this a 9 to a 10, and I personally would put this among my favorites. However, just because it's among my favorites doesn't mean I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah.
You know?
So my thing was always, so again, when I first watched it, it would have been like within the year it came out. I didn't see it in theaters, but I saw it, and after everybody had, because it was at a point I saw it where everybody had already talked to death about it, about how it was like one of the greatest films of that year, and how it was just, it's going to become like a modern day classic. And I remember watching it with that in mind, because I was also like, oh, do I need to watch the first three Mad Maxes? And everybody I asked was just like, no, you do not need to see the first three Mad Maxes to truly get something out of it. I'm like, okay. And so then I watched it, and I was like, huh. I was still confused. I definitely understood the fact that I didn't need to see the first three to truly understand the timeline, but there was still something missing, I felt. Um, and so, but I feel like watching it again this time, after having seen the first three Mad Maxes, even though, yes, they don't have anything to do with one another, I still think there's that evolution that I appreciate. So that now that I've seen the first three, and now that I've seen Fury Road after having seen those first three, I do start to understand why people consider this like amazing. I think you definitely need those first three to truly get an idea of the evolution that led to Fury Road being made.
Right. I think if you watch the movie and you're immediately hooked on it, like, yeah, this is amazing, I don't need to watch the other movies to understand its brilliance,
Sure.
that is fine. And that
Yeah,
is completely valid.
absolutely.
However, I agree with Hal. We are. I think the two of us are definitely the kind of people that need a bit more to truly understand the brilliance.
Yeah. Which is why I always champion for rewatching films. Like, I was never, like, even though I've watched this a couple of times beforehand for years, being like, it's still not connecting. I'm like, maybe someday it will click. And I feel like, even though, again, I'm still not in the camp where I think this is like the greatest film ever made, the greatest action film ever made. Like, I don't think it's flawless, but I finally do get it. Like, and even still, like, it's not that I didn't get any of the hype beforehand. Like, the things I liked about the movie, everybody else liked. Like, I'm not saying the things, like, because I think it's safe to say the things people like about this movie, anybody who watches it is going to like it. The action, the cinematography, the stuff like that.
I mean, there's so much stuff in this movie
Yes.
that's so likable. And it's not one of those movies that keeps throwing shit at you and like, hey, like it's not one of those jingling keys movies like
No.
the Emoji Movie or anything like that. And I know that's a weird comparison, but that's just the first thing that popped into my mind. I'm sure that there are better comparisons
Mm-hmm.
than comparing it to a trash movie like that, but
Yeah.
um okay, you know what? I'll say this. It's better. A better comparison is like the Super Mario Brothers movie, because that's not a bad movie by any means, in my opinion. It's an Illumination film, I know, but that's one of those movies that's effective because it relies on fan service.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's constantly throwing stuff at you and jingling keys in your face, and being like, look at this thing from the game, look at this
Yeah.
thing from here.
It's
And
elevated to a cinematic sense instead of it just being in the video game. Yeah.
right. And it's effective, and I think it works from a marketing standpoint, and I think it's the movie's strong sense.
Yeah.
But by contrast with Fury Road, it kind of does the same thing. However, it doesn't rely on any nostalgia. It takes all these new concepts and puts it in your face and says, look at this cool thing we created.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I remember Emp Lemon was talking about it in his video. A lot of what he was saying about this movie is how it's not a Star Wars, it's not a Marvel action film. it's not falling for the same traps that a lot of movies from that era, then even into today's era, it's not falling for. And I was like, well, yeah, it's not those things, but I feel like that is true. Like, it's not falling for any nostalgia baity traps. It is trying to do its own thing. And so when you compare it to stuff like that, it is very much a breath of fresh air, which again, I completely agree with.
Right. And it's interesting that Fury Road even turned out the way that it did, considering that it came out the same year as the Star Wars like reboot.
Yes.
And Avengers Age of Ultron.
And the Jurassic World.
Yeah, and Jurassic World. I mean, it had a lot of stuff to compete with, but ultimately, while Fury Road has stood the test of time as being a much more well-made film than any of those movies, it was kind of doomed to not be as financially successful because we had waited, like, the last Star Wars movie came out in like 2005.
Yeah.
And it had been 10 years since we saw Star Wars on the big screen. And the most we had with Star Wars was Clone Wars, which was great.
Yeah.
And, but everyone was really, excited to finally see another like Star Wars film.
Yeah.
And also Age of Ultron was obviously going to be successful because everyone was riding the hype of Marvel at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is before, nowadays there's a huge fatigue with Marvel content.
Yeah, this was before this was before Phase 4, exactly. This was when the MCU was in the good graces of people.
Yeah, this is when the MCU was actually enjoyable. This is when it didn't fit. This is when you actually were excited to go see it.
Yeah, and it wasn't out of obligation.
Exactly. And then also Jurassic World. I mean, the last Jurassic Park movie came out in 2001. It sucked ass.
Yeah.
And actually, oddly enough, I suggested, because when I knew I wasn't going to be able to do Close Encounters, I wanted to do The Lost World.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not going to go into a whole tirade about that now, but all I'll say is I don't think The Lost World is that terrible. It's not a good movie by any means. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it for the same reason I kind of enjoyed, like, Revenge of the Sith. Like, Revenge of the Sith is a very mixed bag of a film.
Yeah.
But those two films both have some amazing scenes individually, but are very, like, messy plot-wise. Whereas Jurassic Park 3 is just a complete, like, utter disaster of a film.
Yeah.
Like, I think James said it in his Spielberg ranking. He's like, I think I'd rather watch the Allen thing. But that's the only thing. Oh, shit. Sorry. I just got a ring for the mail. I just got to go tell my partner to go get the mail.
Yeah, go get the mail.
Just give me 1 second.
There was a little Spanish flea.
All right, I am back. So again, I just had to tell my partner to get that. Were you just saying anything?
No, this time I didn't say anything. So.
Oh, okay.
It's fine.
I don't. Are you going to be edited?
Yeah, I'll cut it out in editing.
Oh, you're going to edit it out. I didn't know if I knew this wasn't live, but I didn't know if you would.
No, okay. I always go in and like edit out like little like breaks in air and stuff like that, and like kind of condense it together. So don't worry, you're totally fine.
Oh, okay. So then I can say this: fuck.
I'm leaving that in.
I knew you would, but okay. But anyway, so as I was saying, Jurassic Park 3. I don't want to talk about this too much because I want to talk about Fury Road, but horrible film, disaster of a movie, made the coolest dinosaur in the fucking world, Spinosaurus, the biggest joke in the fucking world.
Yeah.
I liked it as a kid initially because I thought Spinosaurus was cool, but now in hindsight, I'm like, with all of the new discoveries and how historically inaccurate the dinosaur is, it's just like, we get it. You're just trying to one-up T-Rex and you failed miserably. Fuck you.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it felt more like a TV movie. But my point about bringing this up is like, because the last Jurassic Park film felt like so much of a side story compared to the first one in The Lost World, which definitely felt like they deserved to be part of the film's canon. Like, and then we find out Jurassic World is coming out, and from the trailers, and I think the finished product definitely felt worthy of being part of it. And At least the first Jurassic World. I think Fallen Kingdom and Dominion are both trash.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
another story.
Yeah.
But I think, honestly, if you were to take Jurassic Park, The Lost World, and then Jurassic World, I think that's a decent trilogy, in my opinion. That's a decent trilogy.
That's fair.
But anyway, my point about bringing that up, though, is that you had all these movies coming out at the same time. And like Mad Max is kind of not super obscure, but like compared to these other three major blockbusters, blockbuster franchises, it was gonna have a hard time. I think that at the very least, it should have done a little bit better financially, but such is life, I guess.
Yeah. I think the good news out of that, though, it didn't do gangbusters, but I feel like it's remained culturally relevant far more than any of those other movies. Because I feel like, I guess there's an argument for The Force Awakens, but even still, I know far more people that would say they would rather rewatch Fury Road than any of those movies. It is very much like when people are saying like, oh, it's going to become a modern day classic. It's like, yeah, it's been almost 10 years and it is seen as one of the most important films of the 2010s. Like, say what you will about it. Like, again, I'm not totally a huge fan of it as much as other people are, but I understand and would rather say like that is going to go down in film history as like one of the films from the 2010s that will definitely go down as film classics.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if we were to rank all four of those films together, like Age of Ultron is definitely, like, I'm not going to sit here and rank all four of them numerically, but I'll say this. Age of Ultron is definitely the weakest Avengers film. So I feel like, and especially compared to the hype surrounding Infinity Wars and Endgame, Age of Ultron has definitely been a lot more forgotten. Jurassic World, I think, has been remembered as probably the second best Jurassic Park film. However, that's kind of all it is.
That's all it is. Yeah.
It's just like, okay, we finally got something decent after all these years.
But it will still never be in the same league as that original film.
Yeah, no, nothing will ever be in that same league. I mean, Jurassic Park is like my second favorite film of all time.
It's so good.
Yeah. My first favorite film is the original Godzilla. But, But nothing would ever top Jurassic Park. But with Fury Road, it had an opportunity to top its original trilogy because it had been so long, the technology had been better, and also, you got this new cast. Like Mel Gibson's too crazy to be recast. He's too old. So you got like Tom Hardy and like all these other like amazing like ensemble cast actors, being brought in for this like extravagant reboot. So even though it wasn't going to do as financially well as all these other huge blockbusters, it was inevitable that with how the film turned out, it was going to be admired much more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like we were saying with Road Warrior, it doesn't feel like it was made out of obligation. This feels like George Miller wanted to make this movie.
Yeah, and he definitely took his time with it. I mean, the concept of it was pretty much conceived after Thunderdome, and then it was initially I think the first draft of the script was done in like 99 or like sometime in the early 90s. And then 9/11 happened and then they had to put a hold on it because of that. And then I think they had done the first draft of the storyboard in 2004.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then by that time, and then in 2004, that's when the whole controversy surrounding Mel Gibson started.
Right.
And then basically, George Miller then had to find a new person to play Max. And then by the time he got Tom Hardy and everything was said and done, they hadn't started filming until 2012.
Oh, they didn't start filming until 2012. Oh, I didn't even know that.
I think so. I think that production initially started in 2012.
Right. Okay. It's interesting to think about the fact that it was like storyboarded in 2004 and like written in the 90s, because I'm like trying to imagine what Fury Road would be like with like 90s aesthetics. Like that's interesting to think about.
I think it still would have turned out good.
Yeah.
Because even so, the film, while there is CG in the film, there's still a lot of the movie is shot on location. It was
Yes.
shot in Namibia and South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and which I think was a much better aesthetic choice than filming it in Australia like the other movies, because Namibia had much less vegetation, and I think it allowed to show a progression of the apocalypse.
Yeah.
Like now we're at a point where society has redeveloped into this chaotic world.
Yeah.
You know, this is the new norm.
Yeah.
There's nothing.
You have canyons and dunes of sand everywhere.
Yeah, and it's not like in the Road Warrior where, you know, Gastown had some pigs and chickens. Like, there is nothing.
Yeah.
There's not even like animals to be harvested. Like, in the very beginning of the film, Max eats this two-headed lizard because that's the only available food.
Yeah.
And there's a part where Nux, like the guy who says, "Oh, what a lovely day."
Yeah.
There's a part where Nux is in the truck and he eats a bug.
Yeah, it's great.
You know?
I love that.
Yeah, because that's the only available food. They have to take what they get.
Yeah.
And not to spoil too much from Furiosa, but this is the only major part I'm going to talk about. So there's a scene later on where Furiosa passes out. And I'm not going to give any more context beyond that.
Sure.
But she wakes up in Fury Road, all like the peasants that Immortan Joe like gives water to.
Mm-hmm.
We actually kind of get to see what their life is like. They live in these tunnels, and they're basically like, it's revealed that they're pretty much cannibals. Like, they're scavenging off of like the flesh of like their dead friends.
Right.
And they're also using the dead flesh to harvest like maggots for protein and shit. And it's like, it's really gross.
That's
it's probably
awesome.
It's probably the most gruesome scene in the entire Mad Max franchise. And I think that scene alone, it's not very long, but it's on screen long enough to like get a really good reaction out of the audience. There was not a lot of people in the audience when I went to see the film, unfortunately. Because again, the film is sadly not doing too well at the box office, but I think there was about 10 or so people in the audience with me, and everyone during that scene was just like, "Oh, like holy shit!" Like, it was so audible.
That's
and
awesome.
And everyone was so loud that it felt like the whole theater was packed.
Yeah.
You know, and that was just a testament to how well done that was. But it kind of added a little bit more context to the mystery of like, are these people just surviving off of water, or do they have food?
Yeah.
Like, how are they living? And it's like, oh, they're cannibals.
They're cannibals. Yeah. They're cannibals.
What? Buzz! They're gonna eat us, Buzz! Do something quick! Shield your eyes. You idiot, you're a toy! Yeah, so back to Fury Road. So this movie also isn't super long. Furiosa is actually longer. It's 2.5 hours. This one's only capped at 2 hours.
Yeah.
Like, exactly.
Yeah. I thought the pacing was very breezy for what it was. Yeah. Because especially those first 40 minutes was just nonstop. It was great.
Yeah. I mean, the whole movie is one massive nonstop car chase.
Yeah.
And, one thing I actually really admired about Furiosa is they do spend a bit more time at the Citadel. You know, the place where Immortan Joe's kingdom is.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to see a little bit more what life is like there. You really only get to see that in the very beginning and the very end.
Yeah, of this movie.
But I think that's actually a strength to the film.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah, in hindsight, because Fury Road is one of those movies that gets right to the point. It's like,
yes.
Okay, so here's this group of crazy cultists. This is how they live, and that's all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if we do a sequel or a prequel later, like, we can delve into it a bit more. But for now, we're going to focus on Furiosa and Max. Like, that's our main characters.
Right.
But yeah, so starting from the beginning. So basically, Max is pretty much the same as he is in the original trilogy. Or well, I hadn't seen the two, so character wise, he's pretty much the same, or if not very similar to how he is in Mad Max 2.
Yeah, he's very much he's a man of few words, but you understand what he's about just through his actions, his like how he communicates visually and stuff like that. Yeah, no, he's pretty much the same.
Yeah, so he's the same guy. He's haunted by the memories of losing his family right before the war, and but I think there's a strong possibility that in this timeline, Max probably grew up in the post-war world, and he had a family, and they were taken away from him, and he's just haunted by that memory. I have a feeling that in this timeline, Max did not live in the post-war world like he did in the first movie. This Max in this timeline, born and raised in the Badlands.
Yeah.
And like that's all he knows, and he's just trying to escape his past. He's running from his past.
Yeah.
So the film, so it opens up with him basically getting kidnapped by the cultists, and like they tattoo him, and then they try to brand him, and right from the get-go, like, again, there are moments where the film gives you some time to breathe.
Yeah.
But pretty much right from the get-go, there is nonstop action.
Yeah. Like once they actually drive out of the Citadel.
Yeah, so Max gives his opening monologue, and then he's immediately being chased by these marauders.
Yeah, the war boys.
The war boys. And then he's immediately taken to the Citadel, and then he immediately attempts to escape, and then is brought back in.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know what they're going to do to him. Eventually we do see it, but that opening is so effective. It leaves you with questions that do eventually get answered in the film, but it also kind of tells you exactly what this movie is going to be like right from the start.
Right, exactly.
And it's one of the most effective openings to any movie I've ever seen. Like even on my first viewing, like before I was really head over heels for this movie, I was like, that is an amazing opening.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that was phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then immediately after, I don't want to actually like go through the film step by step, but no. But basically after that, then the other part I like is right after the title, there's a close up of a brand, and immediately I think my first thought when watching was, oh my God, they actually branded him, but they actually never show that Max ever got branded with the hot iron. It's actually revealed that the person with the brand on the back of the neck is Furiosa. So I kind of like how they leave that ambiguous, and that they kind of use that to introduce Furiosa. It's a really nice detail that I liked for the movie.
Yeah, I didn't even really pick up on that, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Again, there's like so many little details that you have to kind of watch the movie multiple times to really get everything.
Yeah.
Like there's probably stuff that I'm going to miss that after my third viewing, I'm probably going to notice, next time. Yeah. So then after that, basically we get into the gist that this guy, Immortan Joe, is the leader of this like cult, and he's got control over these cannibalistic peasants. Well, at the time you don't know that, but basically, he's controlling these peasants because he has access to fresh water, vegetation. He's basically like milking. He has like all these slave wives that he's using to breed new war boys.
Yeah.
And, he's using their breast milk like for nutrients, like, cause there's like no cows. And that's another thing I really like. It's like, they really do use whatever resources they have. Like,
yeah.
There's still scavenging at this point in the post-war apocalypse, but they've kind of figured out how to farm, with whatever resources they have, which is another detail I really like.
Yeah.
So I think before we go into Max and Furiosa, let's first like I know we talked about Lord Humongous last or towards the back end of our discussion, but let's first talk about Immortan Joe because
Agreed.
he's really the first character you meet.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you want to start off? I think I've talked long enough.
So the interesting thing about Immortan Joe that I've always been told is that he's played by an actor who was in the first Mad Max, who actually played the villain in the first Mad Max, the Toe Cutter. And this is a completely different character this time around.
Right. I think that adds. I actually knew that too. But it adds like a nice tribute to the original while still keeping it fresh.
Yeah,
like it's something for the old heads to like.
Yeah, but also
it
doesn't feel like nostalgia baity where it's just like, oh, we got this guy. It's like, no, you wouldn't know that unless you actually looked up the actor.
Right, because Immortan Joe, you never actually see his face. His face is always covered by this crazy like respirator mask that he's wearing.
Yeah.
And we don't, and I think it's pretty much implied that he has to wear it to breathe.
Yeah.
Kind of like he's kind of like Darth Vader in that respect.
Yeah, very, very classic villain, kind of like an appendage that's like added on to like kind of show how robotic and not entirely human he is.
Yeah, and there's a lot of his appearance that's very like artificial. Like he wears this chest plate to make him look like he's got like abs.
Yeah.
When he's really just this fat slob.
Yeah, this fat slobby dude.
Yeah, but everyone who sees him doesn't know that unless you really looked up close at him.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's great.
And I also kind of like how like he's basically the father to all of these war boys.
Mm-hmm.
However, he has a set few of like children that like he actually like takes under his wing.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't remember all their names, and unfortunately, unlike Mad Max 2, I'm not going to be going through the Wikipedia page for this one.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, but there's this one guy who I'm not going to. So he's got like tape all over his face or something like that. He kind of looks like John Travolta a little bit.
Is it the like the big guy with like
yeah, the big guy,
Rictus Erectus?
Yeah, that's the big guy who's like, I had a brother, and he was perfect. Yeah, like that guy.
Yeah.
Is that his name, Rictus Erectus?
I think that's his name, yeah.
Okay.
Which is great. The names in this movie are great.
Erectin.
Yeah.
Woo! Also, I'm going to take this opportunity since I made a Team Fortress 2 reference. Do not give your money to Steam until they fix Team Fortress 2. People have gotten doxxed over the bot crisis.
Uh-oh.
Fuck you, Valve. Fix your game. I'm actually not joking either. Like, there have been people in the community who have been doxxed by like trolls because of this. All because Valve doesn't fix their fucking game. Fix your game. People have gotten doxxed. I'm never giving you money again until you do. But anyway, back on topic. But yeah, so Immortan Joe's like children are really cool. And this guy isn't in the film for too long, but there's like this handicapped dude. It's like, go see what's upsetting Dad.
Yeah. He's like in the chair.
Yeah, he kind of like observes and watches over everything. And like at the end, when Immortan Joe is defeated and Furiosa comes back, his initial reaction kind of isn't like, oh no, my dad's dead. He's kind of like surprised and doesn't really know how to process this. He's like, because you can kind of tell he probably never had that much of a relationship with his father.
Yeah.
He's always just kind of been like there. Like, I think he kind of knew that he was a tool for his father. And now he's kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess now I'm, going to be Furiosa's right-hand man,
Yeah.
A lot of stuff is made very ambiguous.
Very much
about
so.
this family.
Yeah.
It's very effective. It's very effective.
It explains what it needs to explain.
Exactly. It doesn't bombard you with shit that you don't need to know.
Right, exactly.
All you need to know is that Furiosa is on the run because she stole all of Immortan Joe's prized wives because she's tired of women being objectified in his society, and she wants to take them back to her home, which is the green place.
Yeah.
the last place in Australia that has like vegetation.
Yeah, exactly. Again, they don't explain this outright, but you understand why they're doing that.
Yeah. And even when they do explain like where they're going and why they're doing this, it's not drawn out. It's like, okay, this is where we're going and this is why we're going.
Yeah, it's straight to the point.
Yeah. So the initial chase scene is probably, here's my one major gripe with this movie. And this is not a knock against like the action sequences. They're all amazing. They're all really good. But I think the peak of action is the first one. Like undoubtedly.
I think so.
Yeah, because so Morton Joe leaves the Citadel and he's got this huge entourage of war boys. Like, and this is also where we get introduced to one of the other main characters, Nux, who's basically the comic relief for this movie. So he's basically helicopter guy.
He does have a lot of helicopter guy vibes to him now that I think about it.
However, the difference with him and helicopter guy is that he's really into this cult initially.
Yeah.
So he really has no morality at first. He's like, their whole thing is like, I live, I die, I live again. Like, I'm going to Valhalla. I'm going to sacrifice myself for a Morton Joe. And he's really in on that. Like, so when we first meet Nux, he's in like the hospital or whatever in the Citadel.
Yeah.
And they're using Max as like his blood bag.
Which is great.
Which was awesome. And like the doctor's like, you're in no condition to go. And he's like, well, then hook up my blood bag. And it's like, it shows how much he's lacking in morality that he doesn't even look at Max as a person. He's like, he's just my blood bag.
He's just going to put him at the front of his car. It's great.
I know. It's so good. And the other thing I love is the tie-in with the score. They had Morton Joe has this, for no reason at all, he has this huge vehicle with a bunch of like dudes hitting bass drums.
Yeah.
And then at the very in the very front, he has this blind dude that, by the way, Hal is using as his profile picture now.
Yeah, I'm screen recording it. So yeah.
This blind dude who plays like this guitar bass or whatever.
The Doof Warrior.
And it shoots fire and it's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Like it is so cool and it adds a layer of like depth to the score.
Yeah.
Like whenever you see this guy, the guitar comes in and there's a lot more bass. And I also do appreciate being kind of like a metal fan myself or like a rock fan that like, that they kind of have like this, it doesn't feel cheesy. Like here, my big thing with rock and metal music nowadays is it feels very conservative. Like, especially in modern metal and rock music, a lot of them are kind of stuck on this idea where it's like, all music is dominated by hip hop nowadays. And I miss when Led Zeppelin was at the top of the charts. And it's like, I really hate that mentality. I like it more when metal bands try new things.
Yeah.
Metal and rock bands actually try like new ideas and have new, fresh music or bring ideas from modern music into their work.
Yeah, trying something new.
And I feel like this character was not only a good kind of way of paying tribute to maybe some of that campy 80s cheese that you could find in like the older Mad Max films, or at least films from that era, but also makes it feel fresh.
Yeah,
like,
because we haven't seen this before.
Right. It's like, here's a really cool thing. Like, sure, rock is kind of at this point an older music genre, but here it is still living in this post-apocalyptic world by this crazy dude with no eyes.
Yeah. Plus, yeah, just the idea of a flaming guitar. It's like, of course you're going to put that in the movie. That's awesome.
I know. It's so cool because, again, society has gotten to this point where it's like, this is their idea of fun.
Yeah.
Like, they had to with nothing to really do, they've had to reinvent like fun, farming, and all this other stuff. Like, I don't know if I already said this, but in Mad Max 2, the Gastown faction has pigs and chickens, and there's nothing now. Like, there's absolutely nothing. I think I already said that, but everything has had to be reinvented.
Yeah.
So it's like it's the idea of taking old things but making it feel fresh, and that's what I really love about this movie. And the fact that they even do that with something like rock and roll is amazing. But anyway, so so let's get back to the chase sequence. So I'm not watching the film right now. I'm actually just trying to remember like as much as I can. We're not going to go through every single point of the film, but all of the important.
Yeah, like I guess like we've been saying, this movie was done a lot more practically. Yes, there's CGI. Like there's that sequence where they go into the sandstorm that I imagine is entirely CGI. Like unless
Well,
they
yeah,
actually filmed it at a sandstorm, I doubt that.
No, that portion was definitely CGI. In fact, it was actually another interesting thing is if you look at the raw footage and the behind the scenes, most of the sand like is not orange like it is in the final film. A lot of that I think had to be done in post with like film tinting.
It is interesting just to talk a little bit about the Blu-ray actually is the images they have on the back of this Blu-ray, they look very muted, like kind of like how a typical action movie would look, which is interesting because then you actually watch the movie and it's a lot brighter than your typical action movie, it's interesting that they did that for this Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's definitely an aesthetical choice. Like everything, like the color that you're always going to associate with Fury Road is orange.
Yes.
You know? And like if you look at the raw footage, the Namibia desert does not look like that at all. It's very like white sand, very dry, whereas and it's still dry in the film, but it adds so much color and depth with like the aesthetical change. And it's like even I'm looking at your Discord profile picture, even though there's no sand in it, and I'm just looking at the guitar guy, it's like you could still see that orange tint.
Yeah, there is still that tint to it.
It's always there, and it's like that is because. And again, I think it also goes back to the new norm. This is the world now. Everything is just orange and deserty and bad, and just this is no longer a blue and green planet. This is an orange desert wasteland.
Yeah. Really gets you into the world building. It's great.
Yeah. So they go a little bit ways, and now let's talk about like the sandstorm, because that I think is the major highlight of the film. Mm-hmm. Even though it does take place pretty early on, I think it's a testament. Even though it's like the rest of the movie is still great.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's a weakness to have some of the better scenes in the very beginning at all. Mm-hmm. If anything, I think that it was a good choice because it really allows the viewer to get hooked.
Absolutely. From that. Yeah. And it's great because even though it's obviously CGI, the CGI that's used is really good. Like it looks good despite it being 9 years old at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually a kind of a problem. Like I like Furiosa, but one thing that's very noticeable in that movie is the CGI. Because I think because this movie didn't really draw as much as they wanted it to, mm-hmm. They only gave George enough to work with. So yeah, Furiosa has a pretty big budget, but this time instead of shooting in Africa, they actually had to shoot back in Australia, and it's a lot more noticeable that they had to use CG and green screens and all these other things. Like it's a lot more noticeable this time around. Whereas with Fury Road, like I was watching the behind the scenes and like there are certain shots where I'm like, wow, that was a green screen? I never would have known.
Yeah.
And also because a lot of the shots are filmed in real time. Like Immortan Joe's entire army is all there. Right. None of it is composited. All the trucks are there in real time. And it's also, I also gained much more of appreciation for it when I found out that fact, because not that I didn't notice that, like I could tell what was practical and what wasn't, but I really didn't know how much of it was practical.
Right.
And when I really realized that most of the effects in the movie are practical and that CG was really only used for the heavier scenes like the desert storm and like just the lighting.
Yeah, it's used as a
made
tool.
I really appreciate it as like not enough movies do this nowadays.
Yeah.
There's too much CG.
Yeah.
We need more films with practical effect.
Yeah, and then if you're gonna use CGI, use it more as like a tool to like enhance some things and to make the truly impossible stuff work.
Right. So that's another huge strength to this movie that definitely brought it up a few points for me.
Absolutely.
But the desert storm scene is so intense. Like the stuff flying through the air, like when the cars get picked up and stuff is flying through the air,
Mhm.
and you even see the bodies like flying towards the camera.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's so cool. And then of course there's the iconic line, "Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!" Which there's so many like one-liners in this movie from Nux in particular and Immortan Joe, like mediocre.
Oh, that's
Like that's
so
another
good.
really good one.
Yeah.
Um, this that to that whole movie just kind of, I mean, that whole line sums up the whole movie for me. Like, what a lovely day! Just the chaos.
Yeah.
Like, this is so. It's so fun to watch. And for these cultists, it's probably so much fun for them because they enjoy this batshit craziness.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, do you want to say anything about the Desert Storm?
I mean, I just was really impressed. Like when it first shows up on screen and the camera pans back and it just keeps going and going just to show the immense size of this huge desert storm. I was like, holy shit. Like it's one of those I've often talked about this when I talked about the Dune movies, how it's one of those few instances where I'm like, this is gargantuan. I know it's in a computer, but I feel the size of everything. Like that's something that whenever these ultra CGI fest movies, what they get wrong is they don't really they tend to not really get the size of things right. Where yeah, I know it's supposed to be this giant like thing in the screen, but I don't feel the weight of that. Whereas I feel like this, you feel the weight of this gigantic sandstorm like blowing everything away.
Right. On that note, it's kind of like if certain Marvel films, like I think with the first Avengers film, it was done very well.
Mm-hmm.
Like even though like they had a pretty grandiose scale with like New York City, they made it work. But with like Endgame, with the final battle,
Yeah.
like, it started to show like how much like they were relying on CG.
Yeah, then you start to realize, there's no weight to this. Like, why should I care?
Yeah. I feel like if movies are going to have a lot more close-up CG, you should try to balance it out by having a much grander setting. Like actually film it on like Fury Road really didn't have to be I think it worked because it was filmed on location. But
yes.
Let's just say if Fury Road was using more CG for close-up shots, then they wouldn't have really had to go to Namibia.
Yeah.
Which actually, yeah, there's a lot of like grand scale shots in Furiosa, but there's a lot less of them because of that.
Right.
Like I think George Miller really knew we have to focus more on like the close-up shots and getting those CG shots right than having these big like set pieces. So it's always good to know when a filmmaker like knows why they have CG in their movies, that they're not just doing it because it's easy to do. They're doing it because they want it to make it look good.
Exactly.
But with that out of the way, so then after that, then we actually get the opportunity to like after this whole huge action sequence that really gets the viewer immersed, then the film actually takes a moment to introduce us to the characters. And this is like, I think 20 minutes into the movie, 25 minutes or something like that.
Something like that. I said the first 40 minutes, but honestly, it might have been like after 20 minutes. I don't know. The pacing was just like, I felt like it was 40 minutes in. It might have been 20 minutes in though.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't remember. It might have actually been 40, but like it felt more like 20 because it was so cool.
Yeah.
But either way, we finally get introduced to Max, Furiosa, the wives, and Nux. And the first scene that we ever have with them, there's like no dialogue.
Yeah.
And there doesn't need to be because as we established from Mad Max 2, Max doesn't really have to use his words to convey like who he is or what he wants.
Yeah, it's all told visually, and with him like, you know, snapping his fingers and just making like grunting noises.
Yeah, but he's also in that scene physically incapable of doing that, and this is something
That's true too.
This is something that Emperor Lemon pointed out in his video was, you know, he just got out of a sandstorm.
Yeah.
I mean, his whole mouth and throat is full of sand.
Yeah,
Like he can't talk.
yeah.
Like he has to use this. Like, I guess even if he was able to talk, he would still try to hold these people at gunpoint because that's kind of the person he is.
Right, exactly.
But at this point, he has no choice.
Right.
Like, if he went up to them and tried to be like, like they'd be like, okay, we're gonna shoot you, you know? Like he has to go up and be like, give me water or I'm gonna shoot you.
Yeah.
Like, and he can't use his words. But yeah, it kind of shows like who the wives are, you know, that they're all like really scared and just kind of like, you know, we want to get out of here. We want to get to this green place. Furiosa is introduced as like, as her name implies, very ferocious. You know, she gets what she wants. You know,
Mm-hmm.
after they finally get the better of Max, you know, there's a little bit of an action sequence where he fights Furiosa, and eventually he overpowers them, and like Nux wakes up and helps Max.
Yeah.
And initially, Nux is kind of thinking like, oh, okay, we're a team now. And Max is like, no, fuck you. You had me as a blood bag, you asshole. It's kind of like the devil in Smiling Friends. It's like, no, you pissed me the freak off, man.
Yeah, exactly.
So Max steals the truck, but Furiosa put a kill switch on it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was an interesting nod to Mad Max 2, because Max had a similar thing.
Yeah.
Where he used that to blow up his car as a booby trap.
Yeah. I like that whole sequence because it shows Max's strengths and it shows Furiosa's strengths. It shows that, yes, the two of them are kind of evenly matched, but if one of them wasn't there, they wouldn't be able to achieve what they're achieving. Like, they need to work together in order to kind of run away from Immortan Joe and his cronies, and to like eventually, you know, succeed in what they're achieving. Like they need each other.
Yeah, it's like for most of the film they really don't want to work together, but they quickly come to the realization that like if they want to get out of this alive, they have no choice.
Yeah.
Which I think is still very fitting to the Mad Max universe.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is in this wasteland. It's like kill or be killed.
Mm-hmm.
So
but
you have no choice.
Yeah, kill or be killed, but also, you know, success is achieved in numbers as well.
Right, exactly. I mean, that's evident by the fact that Immortan Joe has this whole war boy army, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He wouldn't be able to be where he is without it. So yes, success in numbers. So yeah, is there anything else you want to add about that scene? I think that was pretty much all I had to say.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I think it, because it does it sets the rest of the movie up pretty well. Like I said, the fact that they have to work together now because they each bring something to the table that then they're all able to succeed.
Right. And I also like that the wives aren't completely helpless either. Like there are points in the movie where they're like, okay, let's see how much, like Furiosa's like, okay, I want you to count in inventory how much ammo we have, what guns we can still use. Like they're actually useful.
Yeah.
And it kind of puts a monkey wrench in the typical damsel in distress, you know, cliche.
Yeah.
And like even when Immortan Joe like initially finds out, like, and he's asking like the one old woman, like, where is she taking them? And it's like, you're not gonna get them. It's like, because I don't think Immortan Joe really believes that they're gonna get away. He's like, I'm gonna get my property back.
Yeah, exactly.
When he doesn't realize, like, when you're so blinded by this dehumanization of these people, you don't realize how much they're capable of.
Yeah. And it's not that they're like super badass and they know exactly what they're doing. Like they also struggle, but they're learning. Like that's the thing, is like they're learning through Furiosa and Max helping them.
Yeah. I mean, one of the wives straight up dies. Like she gets run over.
That's true too. Yeah.
And
So there's stakes in this movie. Like, you don't know who's gonna win. You don't know who's gonna survive.
right, exactly. And it's actually really sad too because the baby she had in her dies too.
Mm-hmm.
And like Immortan Joe, he's actually really upset about it at first because it was like a perfect child.
Yeah.
But like when they're trying to save her, it's like, I don't think she's gonna make it. It's like, all right, well, what about the kid? And it's like, that's what he really cares about.
That's all he cares about, yeah. Which is, it reminds me of the subplot in the movie Wizards, where the main villain has wives, and he's trying to, because he's a mutant, he's trying to have a human-born child, and he keeps failing. In which case, it's kind of similar to here, where he's just like, is he mutant or is he like the perfect human?
Right, exactly. Also, by the way, if you've been hearing pops in the recording, I'm playing with bubble wrap.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, but I kind of figured that's what it was.
Yeah, so you can leave that in and it'd just be funny.
Absolutely.
Like,
no, that's
I'm
fine.
playing with bubble wrap.
No,
Wait,
please. I
on.
think it's funny.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Look what I found! No, not that! Bubble wrap! Ed! Oh yeah, I'm a huge Ed, Edd n Eddy fan. If people didn't know,
That's a really good Ed impression.
Yeah, I have a massive Ed, Edd n Eddy collection.
Yeah,
like
I think you showed us. Yeah,
yeah, I'm gonna do a video on it at some point, but I'm waiting to get a couple more important items and then I'll do it. I don't know when that'll be, but hopefully soon. I'm just waiting on eBay at this point.
Oh, eBay, sweet though.
Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, it really just. The wives are the biggest stake because you're cheering for them to get out of there. You're rooting for their safety.
Yeah.
And you also don't want to see them go back to Immortan Joe.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Again, yeah. Like we said, there's stakes because one of them does die. So it's like, holy shit, dude. Like, I don't know. It's little things, but these little things go a long way in making you understand why the characters are doing this.
Yeah, exactly. And, each one has a different personality. Like one of them is really like determined to get to the green place. And another one is kind of like, no, we should just go back. This is hopeless,
Yeah.
Like there's a huge like conflict between them because
you may not remember their names, but you understand what they're about.
Yeah, none of them are really sure how this is going to play out, but like some of them are willing to give it a shot while others are like, fuck, we're going to die,
Yeah.
Yeah, the wives are great. I really love the rig that Max and Furiosa drive throughout most of it.
It's a great truck.
Yeah, it's a great looking truck. And it also kind of shows like, how whatever scraps is left, like, because now in this, because I was thinking I'm like, I'd love to have a truck that looks like that. But then I was like, I'd never be able to get that passed with an inspection,
No, it's oh God. Yeah.
In civilized society, you can never have cars like that on the road.
No, it looks more disheveled than the truck in Duel.
Yeah, exactly. I love the movie Duel. It's one of like the most underrated Spielberg films.
It's really good for what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, for a television film and for like his first directorial debut, great movie. Great movie. But that's another story. But yeah, it's like even that truck looked more roadworthy than anything they have in Ferry Road.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, you can tell there's no laws, there's no like OSHA compliance or anything like that.
No.
Everything is like
nobody's forklift certified.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we're gonna take whatever resources we have and we're gonna build the biggest, baddest rigs, biggest, baddest cars we can, because without them, we will not survive.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, and I love how each car is like uniquely designed too. And each one, none of them are CG. Like each one of them is unique. And actually, I don't know how they did it. I guess they had to build them in Namibia. And if they didn't, I couldn't only imagine how much it would have cost them to ship them from like Australia or Hollywood all the way to Africa.
Yeah, that's
You know?
insane to think about. But yeah, you're right. No two cars look the same. Like you can tell when it's Max's car. You can tell when it's those Canyon people's car because they have like all the spikes on them.
Yeah, exactly. And like I think Max's car pretty much gets destroyed in the very beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the car is obviously very similar to how it is in the Road Warrior.
Yeah.
And I think that was also kind of their like destroying that car in the very beginning was kind of George's way of saying this, you know, this is not the original. This is a whole new thing and it's time to let go of the past and, you know, do this crazy new adventure.
Yeah.
You know? So, but yeah, so after all of that, there's some parts like where like they get chased by like this motorcycle gang. I don't really know. I don't have too much to say about that. It's not bad or anything. It's just not really a lot to say.
I really do like the sequence when it's at night. It's obviously day for night, but I think they do achieve it in a way that it still looks visually interesting, where it's like this blue shade where you know it's nighttime. And they're being chased by what is it, the Bullet Farmer and his stuff, because he's in like this Corvette looking car but with tank caterpillar wheels, which is really interesting.
Oh yeah,
and he's just,
and that's the guy.
That's the guy
who gets blinded.
Yeah, he gets blinded.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And then he's just like shooting guns and he's just like screaming. That visually alone is amazing.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what he says, but I'm just like, it's similar to like this meme I saw on a YouTube poop once where it's like, I am the god of hellfire. like that's like basically that same energy.
Same energy, absolutely.
But yeah, that guy's awesome. And also when he's coming too, because they're stuck in the mud and they gotta, you know, wrap around the tree to get the truck out of the mud. And it's like, it's very nerve wracking. It's oh shit, he's coming, you know?
Yeah.
And he doesn't even have to be up close for them to worry about it because he's shooting at them and the bullets are ricocheting off the truck.
Yeah, the pacing, the editing of that scene, it's like it's a little moment, but like it's really well done. Yeah.
That's another, and that also goes to show that the movie did not peak with the Desert Storm. Yes, that's in my opinion, that's the best scene in the movie, but it also shows that there's still so much more to do.
There's still so much to show off. Exactly. And I love the part. I was at first a little weirded by this. I'm like, oh, like when Max goes to the Bullet Farmer and you don't really see him blow them up. And then he comes back, he's all covered in blood. And one of the wives is just like, did that hurt? And Furiosa is like, that's not his blood on him. At first I was like, oh, we didn't get to see that. But at the same time, I think that's one of those really funny moments that would be in a Mad Max movie. And it is funny. So like, I'm fine with it because, you know, we still get other action sequences.
Yeah, exactly. I think, and again, it'll that scene in particular allowed us to kind of have a bit of a chuckle.
Yeah.
But speaking of comic relief, could we talk about Nux?
Let's talk about Nux.
Yeah, I think honestly he's probably the best character in the movie.
Yeah, because he does go through like Helicopter Guy. He goes through a genuine arc. Unlike Helicopter Guy, who gets a happy ending. Although I guess you could argue Nux does get a happy ending, even though he does die.
Yeah, I actually wanted to talk about that specifically because, as we established, when we first meet him, he has like no morality, just like all the other war boys.
Yeah.
And initially, so Morton Joe, he gets a special treatment. So most of the time with these guys, they spray like the chrome paint in their teeth and then they die.
Yeah.
But Nux gets like a huge like deal. Like Morton Joe himself sprays the paint. And Nux is like, I'm not only going to Valhalla, but I'm getting like the 72 virgins treatment. Like I'm going to have like the most orgasmic afterlife ever.
Yeah.
And then he trips because his chain gets caught like on the truck. And that's when like the mediocre line comes from.
It's great. It's pathetic and also a little depressing because even though you know like it's all bullshit, what Immortan Joe is like saying, you still feel the devastation from Nux in that moment because you're just like, "Aw."
Yeah, so it's like his whole world gets shattered, and
Yeah.
then one of the wives who he ends up kind of falling for as like a love interest finds him and is like, and she's not immediately like, I'm gonna tell the others that you're here and we're gonna kill you. She's like, his whole world has just been destroyed, and the talk that she has with him kind of brings him to reality, and he starts to realize that these aren't objects and that pretty much his whole life has kind of been a lie.
Yeah.
But he's not really destroyed by that fact. He's more like, okay, so now I've been given a second chance, and now I have the opportunity to kind of have a life of my own.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, it's really inspiring.
Yeah. So it's really cool that like he's kind of the rogue warrior in that way,
Yeah.
So like if Max is the road warrior, Nux is the rogue warrior.
That's a way to put
kind
it.
Of kind of a cheesy play on words, but you know what I mean.
Makes sense.
But yeah, and I think actually him dying was pretty necessary because it kind of allowed it to come full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sad, but that's kind of what he wanted all along.
Yeah.
He was like, if I'm going to die, he says in the beginning, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die, extravagant.
Yeah.
He's
going to die making the ultimate sacrifice.
Yeah.
But for something that he truly believes in.
Right. And eventually he stops believing in Immortan Joe and he ends up believing in Max and Furiosa's cause.
Yeah.
And so he was like, this is it. Like, this is Valhalla. This is what I'm going to die for.
Yeah.
If I'm going to die for something, it's going to be something that I know is worth dying for.
Yeah.
So it's really cool that he has his character arc, but also kind of gets what he always wanted.
Yeah, it's great. And he's just a side character in the movie, but he gets that kind of treatment. So that just shows you where this movie's strengths lie.
Yeah, exactly. It's so effective. Beyond that, I think there's two other things I wanted to talk about. The very end of the movie and a couple things about Max and Furiosa.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also wanted to talk about when they eventually get to like the old women.
Yeah, so do you want to talk about the old women first?
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I really like the clan of old women because they even say like we're the last of like the old world. Like we remember how things were like before this all went to shit.
Mm-hmm.
And but the most devastating part about meeting these is when they basically say that the green place is gone.
Yeah.
And the fact that we actually already saw it is when they talked about like with all the dead bushes and the crows and all that other stuff.
Yeah, you don't even think about it, and then it's revealed. It's just like, oh yeah,
like that was it the whole time. And Furiosa has this complete breakdown where she's like screams like, and then that's the point. Like Nux, her whole world just gets shattered.
Yeah.
And basically she's like, screw it, we'll find another new green place. Just like, we're gonna go across this desert to find it. And Max is just like, all right, you're on your own. And this is kind of the first time that you really see Max start to care.
Yeah.
Like, this is where his first real story arc comes in, where his memories come back and he's like, you know what? I'm not going to make that same mistake twice. I'm going to help these guys because I know that they're just going to die out there.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's like, listen, you're not going to find anything out there. And even if you do, it's going to take you years. So why don't we go back and take the Citadel while it's vulnerable?
Which, yeah, it is vulnerable.
Yeah. And I like that Max has his own character arc, and that it doesn't really after that point it doesn't feel like he's doing anything for selfish reasons anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think he still kind of wants it to be that way, but the universe doesn't allow it. Like he still wants to be that scavenger, but he's just like, I can't. Like there's something in me that's just not allowing me to let these people die.
Yeah.
And I really loved that part of it. I really love that part of the whole, meeting the old lady clan.
Hmm.
Is there anything you want to say about that?
No, you pretty much nailed it on the head, basically. Like I think basically when we meet them, and then that whole reveal of the fact that the green place isn't there, but that even though they haven't found the green place, they still have they still need that hope where they're just like, all right, we can't give up. We've gone this far, and through that, like they come up with a plan that ultimately is ends up in their favor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that there's so much more I can say, but I think I would need a third rewatch to truly say it all. So
Sure. Yeah.
I don't want to completely end it here though, because I got one other major important thing that I think is worth addressing, and that is the very end.
Please.
So after that, so unfortunately, some of the grannies or whatever you want to call them do die.
Yeah. Again,
Um,
adding on to the stakes of okay, nobody's safe here. Like anybody will
yeah,
can and will die.
right. But the cool thing is that um, so they make it back to the Citadel with the Morton Joe's body after they kill him.
Hmm.
And you know what? Actually, there's one. I don't really have a ton to say about the final battle. Not that it's bad; it's amazing.
Yeah.
But like,
It
I
speaks
think
for
talking
itself
about it,
visually.
yeah, talking about it would not do it justice. But one thing I really liked that I actually didn't realize until I was working on that video for Emperor Lemon was the pole vaulters, the guys who go between the cars with like the poles.
Oh
That
yeah.
that was all real. Like
Yeah.
I think only a few of those shots were CG, but like
Isn't that insane?
that's that is insane to think that they were doing those on moving vehicles,
Yeah.
you know. But again, that's how they used to have to do it back in the days, so why should it be any different here, you
Right?
know?
Yeah.
Good filmmaking takes risks. Obviously, you don't want anyone to die on your set, but
That's why
you
you
hire
planned it
people.
out. Yeah, you hire people
Yeah,
who know what they're doing.
yeah, exactly. That's why all the guys in the Jackass movies are still alive. If I did any of those stunts, I would have died immediately.
Yeah, same immediately. No way am I making it out of there.
Yeah, exactly. Um, but yeah, the pole vaulters. I think that was the one major thing I had to say about the ending chase. But other than that, I'll just say this: go see the movie and watch it for yourself
Yeah.
because, like, I can't do it justice.
No, it's
It's
one of
like
those movies that is obviously it's going to be synonymous with film history. Like I feel like it's one of those required like if you have even the slightest interest in film as an art form, it's one of those movies that you definitely need to see to understand what people are talking about when it's brought up in conversation.
right. Even if you don't end up being head over heels for it,
Right.
and if it doesn't end up being one of your favorite movies, it's still worth watching because everyone will.
Absolutely.
I think everyone who I know who's watched the movie is like, it's great.
Yeah.
Like
And I think
it's worth a watch just for that.
yeah, and even though I do know people who don't like it per se, but they understand like why people like it, like what it does well enough. And I'm pretty like cuz I think anybody who watches this movie, they're going to come away saying like, "Oh, the action's great. The cinematography is great." It's like, yeah, those are its strengths. And I guess for other people, even if they're not going to connect with the stuff underneath the action and stuff like that, there's still something there. Like I could never say I hate this movie. Like even back when I wasn't so super into it, I understood what it did well. It just didn't connect with me right then and there. And even though it doesn't connect fully, I still understand why it's considered as good as it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I guess where we'll leave this off is the very end. So Furiosa, after she comes back with a Morton Joe's body, it's essentially implied that she's like the new head of the Citadel.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's going to lead a revolution and she's going to make everyone's lives better.
Yeah. And
And
Max, meanwhile, is on to his next adventure.
right, Max will never settle down. Like even
Yeah.
like the big thing is about Max is that yes, I think more so than probably any other film in this franchise, he's walking away with like, you know, newfound morality.
Yeah,
Like he's walking.
having just
Yeah.
done like a really good thing, like more so than usual.
And and you can tell, like, even though he doesn't always show it, he's proud of that.
Yes.
Like like he doesn't necessarily like make a big deal over it, but I think the most important thing for him is that he knows that from this experience he can move on from like the past that's haunting him. And,
Yeah.
like, you know, become, and become a better person because of it.
Yeah.
Or as good of a person as you can be in the wasteland.
As good as exactly in the post apocalypse, exactly.
He's always going to be that guy, but he's always going to be. But now he's a better guy,
Mhm.
and he's learned more from this experience.
Yes.
Which I think is a lot more than you can say about what Max took away from his experience from the Road Warrior, or even Thunderdome or the first movie.
Yeah, it's still within line of that, treating Max as sort of a mythical figure of these stories being passed down generation to generation. It's another one of those stories that is just going to be told over and over again.
Right. It's just like the Road Warrior came to help us, and then we never saw him again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also like how Furiosa doesn't actually know Max's name for the majority of the film.
Yeah.
At the very end, when they're doing the blood transfusion to save her, because that's another thing too. Like Max actually gives her his blood to save her.
Yeah.
And he's like, "My name was Max. I forgot to tell you that."
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, do you have any other closing remarks? I think that pretty much wraps it up for me.
Yeah, no, it's a good movie. This Blu-ray, it's not the greatest Blu-ray in the world, but it's a good Blu-ray. It looked great in the Blu-ray transfer. I think the back images being kind of a more muted color is kind of funny. Whether or not I keep this Blu-ray, I'm definitely keeping the movie in the collection. So that much is true. Like, I've often debated whether I wanted it for years because, like I said, it didn't really connect with me for years, but I think I'm ready to admit I don't love it, but I do like it a lot, that I want to keep it in the collection so then I can like revisit it from time to time. So this and Mad Max 2 are definitely gonna stay in the collection.
It's like I was actually, after my last rewatch, I was like, you know what, I'm ready to pretty much say, like, I have it listed as a 10 out of 10 or a 5-star on Letterboxd, but that's only because I felt I was ready to put it in like my favorite films.
Mm-hmm.
And my top 50 on Letterboxd are all 5 stars.
Yeah.
But that's only because I like to give my top 50 a 5 star.
Yeah. I don't think I don't think I'll ever give this the full 5. I do have this as a 6, which I know some people are probably mad at that. They're just like, "Oh, so you hate it?" It's like, no, I like it. I'm just not in love with it. I could probably see it raise in score if I truly do start to connect with it, but I feel like Mad Max as a franchise is just something I'm never going to fully connect with. I like it. Well, I like the movies that I like from it, but I feel like there are other movies out there I'm going to connect with more throughout my life.
Yeah, I think for me, I started to connect with it more after seeing Furiosa and the Road Warrior.
Sure.
After that point, I was like, you know what? I really do like this franchise, and I really do like these characters. There's not really a message per se, but I like what they go through.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from the movies I've seen, everybody's likable. Everybody, like, you're rooting for everybody to come out on top.
Yeah.
And it's just a really great, it's just a really great movie, really great franchise. And I think the biggest thing, at least I don't want to speak for you, but basically to say this, what brought this movie up to basically being like pretty much an 8 to like a 9 for me is pretty much the fact that like I got more into the story. Like the story did a lot more for me, whereas I can kind of tell with you is like you really didn't connect as much but what really sold it for you was just all the effects, all the action sequences, and all of that.
No, that's fair to say. I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah, there are plenty of films that I watch that are like that. I mean, pretty much like 75% of the Godzilla movies are like that for me. Like I don't watch them for plot. There's only about 5 or so Godzilla films that I actually watch for plot. And that's like the first one, Godzilla -1, GMK, and like probably the new Godzilla versus Kong. That actually had a really good plot. But that's about it. So it's really nice though when you get an action film that doesn't just feel like it's there to be a popcorn flick and actually has something to say.
Yeah, of course. There's always going to be action movies like that. It's whether or not you connect with it, I would say. You know, because you're going to have different varying answers for that.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. That sums up my feelings on Fury Road. I think if you wanted to ever have me on again, I'd like to talk about Furiosa, and maybe like after I do another rewatch of Fury Road, I might have a little bit more to say about it. Because honestly, it's one of those movies that I'd have to, again, I think because so much happens in the movie, I'd want to do multiple rewatches to really get everything.
Yeah. Maybe someday we'll do an actual Mad Max franchise review, but yeah, I think just having Fury Road and Road Warrior for this one made more sense.
Yeah, I think
considering where I'm at headspace wise with this franchise.
Yeah, so actually keep me posted on that. We could, after you see Furiosa, whenever you get around to that, let's do a follow-up to this and do a whole like Mad Max retrospective.
Yeah.
Because then by that time I'll probably have watched the first movie and Thunderdome.
Yeah. Who knows when that'll happen? I honestly have no idea.
I mean, the movie's still out in theaters, so probably not for a little while. Probably not till like the fall or maybe like early next year.
But also, yeah, I don't know if I'll have time with the scheduling because I have so many other episodes. But you know what? That's for later down the line.
Exactly.
Eventually, yeah. So, well, well, okay. Forget about eventually. Let's talk about now. Now, Ben, why don't you shout out your stuff, dude? Where can people find you? Okay,
so first things first. You can find me on the Schaffrillas channel right now. I'm pretty much one of, if not the main editor for most of James's stuff. Like pretty much every video he's made, like with the exception of a handful, every video he's made since like summer 2020, I've basically been the main editor or at least had a hand in the video.
Yep.
So you can pretty much find me there. So just Schaffrillas Productions. But as for my main channel, I'm not really doing much at the moment because I'm busy working with other people, but my channel is Goop Videos on YouTube. I would definitely recommend checking out my YouTube poops because I had a lot of fun making them. Yeah. And if I had time to make them, I'd make more. But right now I can't. I want to, but by the time I get done with everything, I feel too mentally drained. But eventually I do want to make another YouTube poop. I'm thinking about possibly remaking remaking both of my Despicable Me YTPs, like just taking the best. I'm thinking about taking the best moments from each of them and just making like a compilation, like re-editing all of my favorite moments.
Re-editing your favorite moments. Yeah, that would be cool to see. I'm sure you're not proud of them to an extent. I really do like those first two YouTube poops of the Despicable Me movies you've made.
Yeah, I do like parts of them.
Sure.
Like, but even the parts that I do like, I'm like, these could be edited so much better.
Yeah, because they're going on like what? It's been a couple of years since you made them.
It's been a decade
Jesus
since I made.
Christ. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's been a decade. Well, not a decade. Next year, like July, will be a decade since I've made my first Despicable Me YTP.
That's insane. I remember when it was brand new.
I know a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the video that basically kind of put me on the map.
Yeah.
Pretty much. But yeah, so Goop videos on YouTube is my main channel. I was doing Twitch streaming from time to time, but at the moment I can't because I'm in an apartment. And I mean, I could do Twitch streaming. Like, it's not like I'm worried about getting noise complaints. But the stuff I was doing was mostly console based. And right now my setup is in another room. And I can't really wire my stuff through the walls because, you know, my apartment doesn't allow me to do modifications like that.
You just need a lot of extension cords.
Yeah, exactly. But maybe I'll get around to doing that again because I would like to try Twitch streaming again at one point. But for now, I'm not doing it. But maybe next year.
Maybe.
Yeah. But another reason I hadn't really been doing Twitch streaming is I'm not really making any money for it. And not that I like to do things for money, but, you know, I got to make a living.
Yeah,
and
it definitely helps.
I got to focus on what's kind of bringing in the ad revenue.
Right.
You know? So,
of course.
But yeah, so as of now, I'm not doing any streaming, but look out. I might be doing it again in the future. So I have a Twitch channel, but when I do get back to that, I'll also be streaming to my YouTube channel. So if you can't find me there, definitely on YouTube. And then if you want to look at my portfolio, if you're interested about maybe hiring me as an editor or anything like that, I'm at goopvideos.com. And you can look at all the stuff I've done. I got to update it because I got to add my stuff for Emperor Lemon and Nathaniel Bandy, which is like my most recent stuff. But other than that, that's pretty much it. Those are where you can find me.
Yeah, all those links will be in the description below.
Yeah, I'll send them to you.
Oh,
I mean,
please.
you know how to find my channel, right?
Yeah, I type in Goop videos. I find it.
Yeah, so you can put that, but here's my website. So
oh yeah, totally.
If you pretty much just put that in, I'm actually just gonna double check that it still works.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I don't want people to like click on the link and be like, "Hey, wait a minute."
Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna delete that and then send you the HTML.
Sure. There you go. Nice. Yeah.
There
So,
you go.
all right. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
There's a lot to talk about, but hey, that's been the theme with the past couple of episodes. The past bunch of episodes, they reached very long amounts of time.
Yeah, exactly. I wasn't exactly planning on going for 2.5 hours, but I actually, because I do have some other stuff I gotta do, and then I gotta go to Long Island for Father's Day to see my family. So
let's end it here then. Thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye. Just